In accordance with the open meeting law, the board states for the record that this meeting is being recorded by NORCAM and may be recorded by other local media. Before we rise for the pledge, is this on? Can folks hear me?
Yep, it's on.
Before we rise for the pledge, I just want to ask everyone to, after we finish the pledge, to remain standing. I'd like to take that opportunity to take a moment of silence to think about the loss of life of that young boy from Lawrence, and also the others that were injured and the ones that were displaced into that tragic gas explosion in Merrimack Valley. I think it's a good opportunity for the community to take a moment of silence at that time before we start the meeting. And then I do apologize. I did make a last-minute change to the agenda this evening, you'll notice. And we're going to talk a little bit about that, okay? So please rise for the pledge and then remain standing.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
So before I turn it over to the town administrator to discuss the Merrimack Valley natural gas emergency, I just want to take a moment to make sure the communities that were affected in this event know that North Reading is here to help. We've been in touch with those communities. We continue to offer a helping hand. But I also want to take the moments to thank our first responders for their quick reaction and their commitment to all those communities to help them through that very challenging time that we went through. I also want to thank the residents. I'm sure other board members had other residents in town reach out to them. I've had a lot of people contact me when the whole thing happened, offering shelter for those who have been misplaced, offering food, clothing, and support. It's just a reflection upon the type of community we are, and I really do. And I'm very thankful for that. So I just wanted to state that right up front. I wanted to turn it over to the town administrator. I'd like him to just give the community an update on what we're doing, how we're participating, how we're supporting our fellow neighbors. And I'll turn it over to Mr. Gilberto.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think by now, as the community is aware, we've been monitoring actively the situation with Columbia Gas in North Andover and Lawrence. Again, to reiterate what was communicated to the community on Thursday night, we are served by a different gas utility, National Grid. We're not connected to the distribution system that was impacted in the three communities. And there was no indication of a threat to North Reading on Thursday evening. And I want to recognize National Grid for getting us an answer quickly, too, when we reached out to them. They responded very quickly to us directly. Both municipal and school officials extended offers of assistance to the neighboring communities on Thursday afternoon, evening, and then again on Friday and Saturday. The offers included hosting a comfort station or shelter here in North Reading, although thus far that has proved not to be necessary. But I'll just give a quick rundown of the details of the public safety mutual aid that was provided, along with a couple of other items. Some of this was released on the town website over the weekend. We had 2 engines and a ladder from the fire department that were assisting Lawrence, Andover, and North Andover at various times on Thursday evening. We had a police sergeant as part of the Northeastern Massachusetts Law Enforcement Council Incident Command Team there on Thursday evening. We had a police sergeant as part of that same organization, NEMLEC it's called, their regional response team present Thursday evening. A police sergeant and 2 police officers that assisted in field operations on Friday, a police sergeant and 1 police officer assisting with field operations in the communities on Saturday, and we had 1 police sergeant respond as part of NEMLEC regional response team on Saturday as well, Chief. So we had a number of folks who were there, both as direct aid made available by the chief as well as aid made available by virtue of our active participation in NEMLEC, that regional law enforcement group. DPW also responded to a request for generators on Saturday, although the equipment ended up not being needed in the end, but we were prepared to make it available. I think there were 3 generators that I'm aware of that were available. And then again on Sunday, I think we're all aware there was another fire that, from what the media has reported, was not necessarily directly related to the gas situation, but we had one engine respond to Lawrence to cover for the Lawrence Fire Department while they responded to that structure fire on Sunday. So certainly we've had active participation in what's gone on to our north by our public safety departments, and certainly a willingness on the part of our DPW as well. And I know that the superintendent of schools communicated with the superintendents to our north directly on multiple occasions as well. And then another note, just that maybe more directly impacts North Reading. DPW staff was in touch with Andover's DPW staff on Thursday evening and again on Friday concerning the water supply. Our understanding is that the treatment plant, which provided 60% of our water, remained online throughout the entire incident. And when I say online, meaning it was on the grid using electricity from National Grid. In the event of an electrical outage, their backup is diesel generators, so given the gas situation, there was obviously some concern initially with regard to that, but that turned out not to be as big a concern. And again, despite the firefighting efforts, which I believe was 18 fires in Andover on Thursday evening, there was not a significant impact on our water supply, and our tanks remained full. And we did see increased traffic here on Thursday evening due to the road closures in Lawrence, Andover, and North Andover. I'm sure folks, if you were driving around town, you witnessed it, and there was some of that on Friday, although not quite to the extent on Thursday evening. So I more just want to recognize and thank our public safety and public works personnel for their active willingness, all of the folks here in the town hall, who I know were very concerned Thursday evening and Friday morning to make sure that we were responding and doing whatever we could to help. I've spoken directly with the town manager via different media communication, and they certainly are appreciative of the effort. And we're very quick to tell us that this will be a long-range recovery, as I think we're all aware of. So work isn't over. We'll still be available, and it could be something that's not identified right now that comes up, and we're here to help, certainly. So I appreciate the opportunity to provide that update. And again, I thank all of our personnel who were active in participating. I also want to thank the Vice Chair, Ms. Manupelli, and Mrs. Schultz for their time on Thursday evening as well, here in Town Hall, and then communicating with the public. Thank you.
So on the agenda, I moved some things around. Typically, we do public comment first, but I put the Selectmen's reports first because I wanted to give them the opportunity, if you wanted to say anything related to the Merrimack Valley natural gas emergency. So I'll open it up and I'll start with Mrs. Manupelli.
I would just echo what's been said, thanking our first responders. Obviously, we weren't really sure what the nature of this was or the scope. It was pretty extensive, all of those fires burning all at once in 3 different communities, and all of the evacuation effort that needed to go on immediately. The concern of people here worried about, was it going to affect us? So it was remarkable how people mobilized to get there and help out, and appreciate all the effort our TA made as well, just in terms of trying to get the message out to the public and to calm the people that were here, and also get the message out as to what the need was for those surrounding communities. And thank the people of North Reading who also mobilized to help out. Everything from deliveries of diapers and water and blankets to offering their homes for people to live, to stay in as a shelter, offering their homes for pets, just how the community really pulled together and rallied around those people that were affected by this. So that's I just want to echo what's been said already and thank everyone for all of those efforts.
Do you have any Selectmen report tonight? Mr. Schultz.
Yeah, just to echo what you two guys said, I couldn't say it any better. I want to certainly point out Mr. Gilberto was here till about 10 o'clock that Thursday night, making sure everything was, the best we could do at that point. And all the first responders that have been up there, our police, our fire, and the poor kid who lost his life, and the families that were injured, and the families that lost their homes, our hearts go out to you. It's horrible. We hope this never happens again. And I was very impressed I saw a lot of people on social media, again, not to be redundant, but offering their homes, donating supplies, raising money, doing whatever they could as a community. And it's great to see that we live in a community that cares about others and really knows how to give in a time of crisis.
Thank you, Mr. Messeri.
I'd just like to ditto what was said, but also to thank our public safety employees for their efforts in responding in the mutual aid factor. Just something, as I was watching on TV, it was a house, everyone's probably seen it, but I think it belonged to a policeman in Lawrence, and the door was on fire, the front door was on fire, and there wasn't a fire engine there for quite a while. And you start to think about how we work so hard to get our firemen to a particular fire as quickly as possible. In this case, there just weren't enough, even with the different communities participating, there just was not enough engines to cover every single fire. I mean, it was really a disaster. It just shows what happens if you don't get there soon enough. That whole house was just totally, I'm sure everybody's seen it, it's been on the news enough, totally torn down, burned down.
Thank you, Mr. Messeri. Mr. O'Leary?
Again, to echo everybody else's comments, and again, thanking our first responders, and again, the first responders, I don't know how many communities, Chief, you can tell us how many communities actually responded, but they were coming from all over the place, all over eastern Massachusetts, New Hampshire, Maine. The response and mutual, this is why we have mutual aid, I guess, and why it's so important that we maintain these relationships, just in the case of such occurrences. I mean, personally, I've got a brother, a sister, 3 nieces and a nephew, all up in those communities, who were forced out of their homes. And fortunately, theirs were not one of the homes that exploded or caught on fire, but displaced nonetheless. And of course, the anxiety level certainly gets heightened when it hits so close to home, and you're calling them, where are you? Hi, come home, come to our house, or something like that, and offering some shelter just for immediate family members. But again, the outreach from our community and surrounding communities has been terrific and somewhat unprecedented too when things like this occur. I think it's important that we recognize that these types of things can happen. And I think, a little bit later on in the agenda, maybe we'll be talking a little bit about, particularly when it comes to natural gas, and what can occur. Is there a public safety issue that we need to be concerned about for the potential of what can happen? Are these providers able to respond appropriately? And so we'll talk about that, I guess, under another agenda item. But again, for all of our personnel, the time, the effort they put in, the call of the alarms, and the response was fantastic. And I think we communicated with the town administrator that evening. Did we reach out to our neighboring communities and offering? Yes, we did, and as we should have. And I know that if similar circumstance happened here, they would be reaching out to us too. So I think it's sorry it happened. Some of these people are going to be displaced for months, and some of them will never be able to get back into their homes. So it's a tough situation, and I think everybody is responding well. And that's all, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
And I don't want to put the chiefs on the spot, but if there was anything else that you wanted to say that wasn't said, this is an opportunity, and you don't feel obligated.
I thank everybody for speaking well. Certainly, we played a small part in a big problem. But like Selectman O'Leary said, the mutual aid, the way it worked, we're very fortunate to have belonged to NEMLEC, but also there were communities coming as far away as Rochester, New York. So I think in the public safety end of it, hopefully the public would have some confidence that you can never plan for something like that, but when it does happen, that the help is going to be there and that we're going to be there to support, if anything tragic happened here. But I just wanted to say the fire chief actually went up there and was involved in active fires, so I'm not sure if he has anything to say, but very thankful for his efforts as well.
Thank you for this opportunity, and thank you, Chief Murphy. I'd like to thank you all for recognizing the first responders and the efforts that were taken. And I'd like to also just take this opportunity to, speaking for the fire department, to thank the personnel and the men and their commitment to the job and the performance that was undertaken that tragic day. So thank you for the opportunity to speak.
I'll open this up for public comment, and if you are interested in a public comment, please go to the podium, state your name and address, and then I will recognize you. Anyone here for public comment?
Hi, Meg Robertson, 374 Park Street. I just want a public comment on this situation, because it was a fabulous response from what I heard up there in our town. My question is, are we doing an after-action report in regards to that occurred in our town? Because one of the big issues that happened in all three towns is transportation and transporting people out. And they have Merrimack Valley Transit Authority, and they had transit plans set up from what I saw. I don't know if we have access or mutual aid for transit for something like that here, that we need to transport people. So I want that to be considered in regards, if there's an after-action plan, what's gonna happen if you don't have a car, or you can't access your car, or you don't have family to transport you. This is a community that is very auto-dependent, and we need to look at that for the people that even have cars that may not be able to access out as part of our hopefully future plans, because this could have happened to us because we have natural gas. Not that National Grid may be more responsible, but I just want that to be considered.
It's a good concern. Mr. Gilberto, if you just take
So
it.
I'm happy to review that when we review some of the response, when we look for whatever information we can get from the abutting communities as well about what they saw firsthand as well. But that's certainly something that we'll consider. I will note, I'm sure you're aware that we do have now this tremendous resource in Merrimack Valley Regional Transit Authority through our Ring and Ride program. So where we didn't have that direct access, now we have it. But I think it's certainly worth following up with them to confirm that they'd be available to assist us. So thank you.
So we have an emergency preparedness plan that we
Correct.
continue to modify. We've improved on it over the years, especially since we built our new high school. We have now used, we have designated, I believe, the high school gym cafeteria, or the gymnasium, as a site for people to go as a comfort zone, and we have a generator back up there. So, and those plans are pretty in-depth, and this would be one of those discussions that we would make sure we update our emergency preparedness plan to include something a little more wide, town-wide, such as this. Any other comment? If not, we're going to go to the next agenda item. All set? We're going to review and discuss the October town meeting warrant articles. Mr. Gilberto.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I appreciate the board's patience. We did upload a copy as amended by Town Council and Bond Council to the packet later on this afternoon, early this evening. The things that I just want to note, other than some recommended language changes, going in order, Article 6, relative to the participating funding arrangement fund. It was incorrectly established as the participating funding agreement fund at the June town meeting. So we've amended this article to rename the fund to reflect the name of the business tool that we're using, which is the participating funding arrangement. So that article's been amended to allow us to do that. We still do intend to make a transfer into it, and we'll still be able to make a transfer into it in October. The dollar amount for which will be identified most likely on October 1st. With regard to the other changes, we have in Article 10, we had Town Council to weigh in with us relative to how to provide as broad a scope for potential funding on this article, and it's relative to Swan Pond Road for the public. Right now, we're in the midst of trying to obtain signed right of entry forms from the property owners along the stretch of Swan Pond Road that we're looking at, and the town engineer is coordinating that. I know he's been in touch with the principal resident over there, principal petitioner. This article is written to give us some broad ability to respond, whether it be for additional planning, design, or surveying funding, all the way up and through potential construction funding, if that were to be the case. And you'll also see, if you're looking at in the warrant under Article 10, that there's some language in there that reflects potential use of in-kind contributions from abutting property owners, which is, I think, consistent with what the town has done in the past. We've talked about them as being betterments, but they don't qualify as betterments under the law because in most cases we don't accept the road, and based on the feedback in June, leading up to the June town meeting, there really isn't an intention from the board to accept this road. So town council's modified this article accordingly to give us that flexibility. Under Article 11, rescinding the authorization to borrow. It's likely that most of those rescissions would be related to the MWRA project. Article 12, you'll see we've combined it with what was 2 articles. We've made them into 1 article. One component of it would be to fund the water system improvements associated with the Andover interconnection, and one would be to authorize the acquisition of property associated with the water system improvements. And we've talked a lot about the rechlorination station that would need to take place along the town line to add chlorine to the water supply so that it maintains the appropriate chlorine levels as it travels across town, north to south, west to east, from Main Street and then from Central Street as well. So we've combined those articles into one, and I don't want to get too far into the discussion relative to the cost, but I'll just note that the board may want to consider whether it wants to rescind under Article 11 after Article 12 is approved or not. The way it was written, we had the rescission occurring first, but obviously Article 12, you may want to consider reversing the order on those two. In the event that the authorization for 12 didn't occur, would the board want to not rescind necessarily? That's something the board can decide.
That makes sense.
And then the wastewater collection system, I'm just going to note, and again, I try not to talk too long on this because we're going to be back on the agenda later on talking about it, but to make it clear to the public, it's highly likely that we'll be talking about funding to evaluate the condition of Andover's system. And so that article is written to make that more clear. We've added some language in that with town council. Going through the rest of the articles, the Article 19, we've modified it from a street acceptance to an alteration of layout, and the board's going to be acting on that alteration later on this evening, because by the time we get to town meeting, we should have already consummated the taking of that property by filing the order of taking. And then there was some discussion 2 meetings ago about potentially changing the order amongst Articles 20 and 21, and whether or not Article 21 should occur earlier. I mean, this would be the time for the board to make that decision if that were its desire. And obviously, the next act here after this review will be to ask the constable to witness the signing and then to post the warrant. But if we wanted to change anything, most specifically the order of any of the articles, this would be the time to do it. And they are in the customary order with citizens petitions at the end. And we've changed the order of the citizens petitions to reflect the comment made, I believe, 2 meetings ago. So, that's the briefing. The board can also simply vote to sign the warrant as it's printed at this point in time, if that's its pleasure.
Well, then, Mrs. Minipelli?
I definitely think we should shift the rescission to
11 and
after
12.
after the appropriate article.
Okay.
And are we addressing that, any progress on the amending the bylaw, or are we going to be taking that up tonight?
So there may be discussion relative to it. I think under the longer discussion of each article, I'm not sure that there's a significant update other than there have been some conversations, but I guess the short answer is right now, from an administrative standpoint, we do not have a recommendation for language to amend the bylaw.
From our staff?
From Town Hall, yes.
Are we going to be expecting that? Because I would rather have us make a move to amend it if that's what it's going to take to resolve it.
Right, that's it. So I think
That's the-
I think the way that it's in now, 20, probably would work best if we do come up with a proposal, that it would be the board, CPC, everybody else recommending it to amend the general bylaws, and therefore would be able to either pass over the citizens petition if we're in agreement.
And while we're waiting on our director to give us a proposal on amending it, or?
We're waiting
Well, we're
on,
going to discuss it, I think.
yeah, we're gonna
later on
discuss
in
that
the
a little bit
agenda.
later on. I think Andy's been working on it.
Yeah, it's in Andy's hands.
So I think the order that it's in right now works best. So that, if the town isn't gonna make a proposal, we can move to pass over Article 20 and take up the citizens petition. If we take up Article 20 and we have a proposal and it passes at town meeting, we can pass over Article 21. So-
Great. So the only administrative change would be to change 12 to 11, 11 to 12.
Sure. So I'd ask the board if it wouldn't mind taking the vote, and Mr. O'Leary, you have one copy of the signature page. Here's a second copy of it, if you wouldn't mind. And then I'm going to step to my office and just make the correction right now while
So you
you're
want two
voting.
copies signed?
There should be two signed copies,
Two
yes,
signed,
please.
okay.
We'll give one to the constable to copy, we'll keep one original on file.
Right.
I'm going to step out if you wouldn't mind.
I'll take a motion.
Mr. Chairman, I move to sign the October 2018 town meeting warrant.
Second. I have a motion and a second by Mr. Schultz. Any discussion? None heard. All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Unanimous.
And again, I'll be passing around the signatures pages for everybody to sign. There's two. And look for your name, sign on the appropriate line. You witnessing this, John? We're good? Make my X.
I'll help Mrs. Minipelli. Was it you that screwed up last time?
No,
He's going to be,
Somebody.
no,
I watch him good.
yeah, it's
Watch him
definitely.
close. What do you do?
It's definitely-
Somebody signed in my spot.
I got my glasses, so.
Nothing.
Mr. Chairman, are you going to go back to review and discuss the October a little bit later, or now?
Sorry, the review and what?
Review and discuss October town meeting warrant articles?
It's coming up. It's at number 13.
No, 13, okay, that's the wrong copy, okay. Oh, I got it, okay. Continue to review and discuss, gotcha.
Thank you, John. You have a good evening. Okay. To discuss the one-day wine and malt liquor license, St. Teresa's. I believe we could probably do this without the town administrator, right? Mr. O'Leary, do you have a motion?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, I move to approve the following one-day wine and malt beverage license for use on September 24th, 2018, between the hours of 12:30 PM and 3 PM, subject to all regulatory department requirements, St. Teresa's Church, 63 Winter Street.
I have a motion. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second by Mr. Misery. Any discussion?
This is in conjunction, Mr. Chairman, with their golf tournament, and they will be hosting an after-golf thing at the hall at the church, so they'll require a one-day license. So it's similar to what we do for Masonic Lodge and what we did for Columbia Construction. And
Mr. Misery.
Did you say 1 to 3 p.m.?
it's from 12:30 to 3.
3.
Okay.
Any other questions? None heard. All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Unanimous. Okay. So, for the fourth time in a row, I placed the National Grid discussion back on the agenda. And I want to make sure when we start our discussions tonight that we be very careful that we don't take the events that took place in the Merrimack Valley related to this discussion, because I don't believe they are related. Some may want to make that spin, but I don't believe our town is any less safe than it was a week ago, 2 weeks ago, a month ago, a year ago. I truly believe that. And I've asked the chiefs to give me some confirmation on that. I believe if I asked them, they would say the same thing. But it is, I believe, in our best interest as a community to do something to send a message to both parties to be reasonable, to get back to the table. There's been many people who have come here and stood at that podium and said, we need your support to get our workers back to work for the better and the safety of our community. Well, it takes two to come to a compromise. And I've been in touch with the governor's office. I spent several minutes on the phone with his office today, and I've learned a lot. The governor is very interested in this issue, and he's trying to engage. And I believe he's tried to allow time in his schedule to get engaged in this. So he is very much in tune what is going on. In the last board meeting, I did watch it on TV, and I do appreciate the spirited discussion that you all had. But I think the point's been made. I think the community is concerned. I know some have reached out. I've read what's on social media. And so what I'd like to do is, I'd like to propose a resolution. I know many have been discussed. I have not submitted anything forward on the resolution. I would like the opportunity to read my resolution, to get a support for this resolution and approve from this board to send forward. And, to do that, I believe there's a motion in the packet that I gotta read.
Yeah, there's a motion here.
I'm sorry?
There's a motion.
Yeah. And I believe I should have the motion, I gotta read the motion first before I read the resolution, right?
Yeah, I can make the motion.
If you
Mr. Clerk,
wouldn't mind.
And then, all right. Mr. Chairman, I move to approve and sign the resolution of the Board of Selectmen regarding the matter of National Grid and the Steelworkers Union.
I have a motion. Do I have a second?
Second.
I have a second by Mr. Schultz.
So,
Okay, I can go ahead and read now, right?
I believe, Mr. O'Leary, you're going to have Mr. Prisco read.
What's that?
Mr. Prisco's going to read, is that correct?
Go for it.
We haven't even read it into the record yet, so
Let me
we need to read it first.
So I'm going to read through the resolution, and then we can open it up for some discussion. And then I hope we can come to a conclusion on this. And I think if you listen to the words in this resolution, I think it helps us get to where we want to go. So whereas natural gas services is critical to the safety, quality of life, and economic development of a city and town. And whereas National Grid is the utility providing natural gas services to the town of North Reading. And whereas employees of National Grid, including members of the Union Steelworkers District 4, Local 12003 and 12012 Union. And whereas National Grid and the Steelworker Union have been unable to reach an agreement for a collective bargaining agreement to succeed the agreement that expired on June 24th, 2018. And whereas National Grid informs the town of North Reading that it has implemented work continuation plan to ensure uninterrupted and safe gas services for our customers, and a workforce of skilled contractors and management employees. And whereas members of representatives of the Steelworkers Union inform the town of North Reading that they have been locked out of work, and whereas National Grid informs the town that it presently focusing resources on emergency repairs and repair of gas leaks with limited efforts towards installing new customer services and or replacing existing customer services. And whereas new customer services and or replacing existing customer services contribute to the quality of life, commerce, and or economic development. And whereas the Steelworker Union's approximately 1,200 employees in our region, and whereas the ongoing work continuation plan or lockout is adversely impacting the lives of steelworker unions, therefore let it be resolved that National Grid and the steelworker unions are respectfully requested to dedicate as much time as necessary as soon as possible to discuss and or negotiate to return to normal personnel operations. And further, let it be resolved, the United States government, including the executive branch and Congress, are respectfully requested to take any and all possible actions to facilitate discussions and/or negotiations between National Grid and the steelworker unions with the goal of returning to normal personnel operations, and resolved, the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, including the constitutional officers and general court, are respectfully requested to take any and all possible action to facilitate discussions and/or negotiations between National Grid and the steelworker unions with the goal to returning to normal personnel operations. And resolved, that the copy of this resolution be forwarded to the President of the United States, the North Reading Congressional Delegation, the Commonwealth of Massachusetts constitutional officers, and North Reading State House delegations. And resolved, that the copy of this resolution be posted on the Town of North Reading's website to advise residents of the position of the Board of Selectmen on this matter and encourage residents to contact National Grid and/or your steelworker unions to express your personal opinion on this matter. So I know there's a lot of words there, but I think this is what needs to be done. I encourage the board to vote to approve this resolution. Like I said, I've been in touch with the State House. I've been in touch with Representative Jones. They are all very active in what's going on. They're trying to stay in tune to it. They are concerned because it is true. Every day we don't have these skilled workers out on the line. It is a challenge, and there is always that possibility of an additional risk in the community. It certainly does add delay to people getting this service, new services done. In a community like us, where we pay a lot in our rates for our gas, we deserve those services. They should get completed. And the only way this is going to get done is, like I said earlier, both parties have to come to the table with a willingness. The challenge that you have out there is you have a lot of other unions that have already ratified this contract, and you have two holdouts. And there's a lot of concern on the governor's part. Any type of engagement by the government, what happens to those already executed and ratified contracts? And is it a reopener, and is it turned into a larger discussion now? And then ultimately, where does it all end up? At the expense of the taxpayers as well. That's why I think we need both parties to be reasonable here so we can come to a conclusion on it, because it's gone far too long, and there's 1,200 quality workers that are sitting out there who should be out working in our streets and provide us these services. So I leave it to my board members to take it from here. I would like to come to a resolution tonight. I'd love to finalize this subject tonight, send this message along. I'd make a personal commitment to everybody that on a weekly and daily basis, I will continue to contact Brad Jones's office and to get updates. And I encourage everybody in the community, if you have your National Grid bill, read it. There's a customer service line there. Call them if you're concerned in any way. That is the place to go and voice your concerns. Here isn't going to help you much. But the more of us that reach out to National Grid, when I sent my check in this month, I wrote a letter and included that letter. Was my concerns to National Grid to get everybody back to work for the better of our community, because we paid for that. We're paying for those services. And I encourage everyone else to do the same, because that's powerful. But here, and spending more time in this room, I don't think it's going to help anybody else. I think we've exhausted it. It's our fourth time it's been on the agenda. And I hope that sends a message to how much we support our union workers, but we also support our service provider as well. And so I leave it up to the board to decide what you want to do. But you have a motion, you have a second, you're in my resolution. Any comments?
I think we've talked about this ad nauseum. I agree. We spent an hour and 10 minutes on this at our last meeting. I think what you offer is reasonable. I think both sides have to come to the table and be reasonable. They need to get this done. I think it's not fair to our citizens that they're not getting the service that they deserve because these two sides can't get to an agreement. And it's both sides. I'm not singling out one or the other, I'm singling out both. And I think, our citizens get harmed, and if their costs go up because of this, I'm gonna have a real problem with that. So I would agree with your proposal.
Mr. Messeri.
I agree also, Michael. I think it's extremely important that the pressure be put on both parties to come to a resolution. It's not our business to decide who's right or who's wrong. But I think it is our business in the best interest of the community to get this issue resolved.
If there's no other, Mr. O'Leary?
Yeah, I do have some comments, and I can't help but make a correlation between what occurred up in the Merrimack Valley and here. Regardless of what the cause was up there, the provider would be responsible for immediate response, emergency response, shut-offs, repairs, and all the rest. And obviously, Columbia Gas has failed miserably right from the outset, and the governor did step in and directed the State Department of Public Utilities to step in, and even called on another public utility to take over the oversight of the continuing efforts to put people back in their home and put things back in place, and that was Eversource. So they put Eversource in place. My guess is, it's not a big stretch here. National Grid wasn't even eligible to do it because they've got 1,250 of their most eligible people and proficient and educated people and skilled labor force locked out. National Grid can't even provide some mutual aid and assistance to another utility because they can't even meet the current needs of our community and the communities that they serve. They're just doing emergency leak repairs. They've already admitted that they can't do normal repairs. They can't tie in new services. And there's a direct correlation as to how well is our provider going to be able to respond in case of emergencies such as this. So I think there's a direct correlation here. And Eversource was chosen for a reason. They can do it. National Grid isn't even on the grid. And there's a reason for that. They've locked out their most skilled workers. They need to get these people back to work. It impacts their ability to service our needs, both from economic development, private homeowners as far as new tie-ins and turning them on, turning them off, just normal services. They've admitted they can't do it. God forbid anything else happens here from an emergency standpoint. Who are we going to be relying on? Probably Eversource, not National Grid. So I think it's important for the board to recognize that, acknowledge that, state it publicly, that there's a level of responsibility that National Grid, through their own decision-making process, through the course of negotiations with their unions, is having a direct impact on this community. And for our public safety directors and the chiefs, and with all due respect, to say that there isn't a potential for an emergency situation here, that our provider can respond on a timely and safe basis, isn't true. And again, I'm not looking to alarm anybody, because God forbid, this occurrence that happened up here, hopefully it's once in a lifetime and should never have happened, and who knows what the cause is. But it can happen. Then it comes down to, how can our provider respond? Can they respond in a responsible manner? No. Currently, they cannot respond in a responsible manner. And they've admitted that they can't even respond responsibly to meet the normal operational needs of our community. So, yeah, I have a problem with it. So again, and I appreciate, again, the effort that was put in, because I know the effort I put in, Mr. Maypelli put in, to put something together. And I think it's important we say something. But I don't think we've gone far enough here in recognizing that National Grid is shirking their responsibility to provide the best skilled labor force that's available to them, which is 1,250 of their most skilled workers that they've locked out, to our community. This is what they've done. So let's say it. Let's say it. And say, you know what? Go back to the table and talk. In the meantime, get these people back to work. So in the abdication of their responsibility, we have a responsibility. I don't want the responsibility, but we have a responsibility. And again, I think we're doing the right things, and what you're suggesting here, writing to our legislators, writing to the congresspeople, trying to get DPU. And obviously the governor made it quite clear the other night. He has the authority to step in and force the public utilities to do what's in the public's best interest and what's from a public safety standpoint. And he needs to do it. He needs to get these people back to the table, and he also needs to say to National Grid, if by a certain date you can't do it, put these people back to work and provide the services that you have the opportunity to do here. Otherwise, you're not going to operate here. Or we're going to step in, have someone else do it. So, I appreciate it. Am I going to support it? I would like it to have a little bit more meat in relation to recognizing that National Grid is shirking their responsibility. There needs to be something in there to say that. They need to get people back to work. So, and again, National Grid isn't even on the grid as far as being able to provide mutual aid in the situation that's up there, and that's shameful. Absolutely shameful.
Mrs. Minipelli.
And I actually would echo what Selectman O'Leary stated, and I also think that there's a reason why we've been deliberating this. We're 5 different people with 5 different ideas about how this should be addressed. But this, to me, is no more compelling today because of what happened than it was 3 weeks ago when Mr. Monahan first came to us. It's the same scenario that we need to address. And I do agree with Steve, what we heard before. This isn't the first meeting we've discussed it. Last meeting, we spent an hour on it. The meeting before that, we spent a long time on this. So this isn't just arising because of what's just happened. But what was compelling to me was these workers were willing to go to work and were locked out. So that, to me, speaks volumes. Anything that we have seen over the past week, we haven't gotten any PSA from National Grid that I'm aware of. I haven't seen it to at least allay people's concerns as to what's transpired there. I didn't see anything. I'm getting the PSAs from our town leaders and from our town administrator. That's a huge concern to me. Another huge concern to me is exactly what Steve said. They can't polarize a workforce because they've locked out the workforce that's qualified to get up there and respond in the emergency situation. Who do they have? I'd like to see more in this by way of telling us what are they going to do in an emergency scenario, as hypothetical as it's going to be and as unpredictable as it can be. What are they doing to help us and the concerns that we have as a community? That hopefully this will never happen. It will never happen again for another community with another gas provider. But what have they done? What are they doing? I know it was only a week ago, but it doesn't seem like there's been any effort made to even address this with us. And that's a concern that I have. I agree with Mr. O'Leary. I think it needs to have a little bit more teeth. Give us your corrective action plan. Give us your emergency active plan. You don't have your workers. What are you going to do if this happens? Because it does impact us directly if something like this, God forbid, were to happen. And then I would also like to see something by way of, one of the things that we were discussing as we were wondering what else we could do to help the TA, probably just bothering them by sitting there, but, wondering what we could do to help, is what have they shown us for our infrastructure? Because the thing about this was the scope and the size was unknown. It was fires going on all over the place, evacuations happening like we talked about earlier. What do we know about our own infrastructure? What is the plan? What do we have for information so that, God forbid it does happen, that we have this information and knowledge? We need to shore that up. And I know that's a public safety issue, and obviously we don't want to publish and broadcast where all the gas lines are located, but what is National Grid doing to help us out with that? Because if anything, this should have been a massive wake-up call to them and everybody else that runs these kind of utility companies to get back to the drawing board, get back to the table, and so far I don't think that's happened.
But I think as strong as you want to be on the National Grid, which I can appreciate and I support, but we also have to be as strong on these union workers as well. They have to have a willingness as well to come to the table in a reasonable time and be reasonable how to come to a resolution. It just can't be one-sided. That's my point here. And if we think we're just going to force National Grid to be the only reasonable one at the table, then this isn't going to get resolved. And that you have to be equally as firm with the union as we are with National Grid. Because if they truly do believe in public safety, they truly are worried about our community, then they should have a willingness to want to get back to work by being reasonable, come to the table and find a mutually unhappy agreement that they all can walk away from. And that's my point with this whole thing.
To me, and I'll answer that, is to what I said last week, and I know you weren't here. Ultimately, this entire scenario only impacts the ratepayers. That's
Right.
the bottom line.
That's right.
We're the ones that are going
That's
to
right.
cover this. So
So-
I agree that it behooves both parties to get together, but they can't they're not doing that. And I think we need to take it up a notch in terms of what we
Well,
need to get from National Grid.
If you want to make a proposal to modify this resolution, I'd be willing to hear it, but I'm telling you right now, we've given this an exhausted amount of time. Mr. Misery, I will recognize you. If there is a modification to this resolution, we'll take it, but I
just
want to
wanted
come
to
to a
make a
wrap
point.
up on this in 5 minutes.
I wanted to make a point. My understanding is, first of all, the negotiations are still going on. And the employees didn't go on strike. They were locked out because they wouldn't agree. And I want to come back to your statement, and I think you're right. It's perhaps both sides.
Well, I
Because
would
if they're
encourage
there
you,
talking and they never agree, the
Call it-
problem doesn't get solved.
call the governor's office, call Representative Jones' office, get the insight from their perspective. I just think you need to hear both sides of it, and they're trying their best to engage this process, to move it along. I promise you that. You know, these are very ethical people that would not lie to me. And so I'm not trying to put blame on one party versus the other here. They're both equally at fault for not getting this thing resolved. And that's the pressure we need to keep on. We shouldn't be just looking at one party here. It's both parties. Get it done for our community. So, Mr. Schultz?
Just wanted to point out real quick, so for the public knows, the Attorney General's office has just gotten involved in this case as well, I believe late last week.
Thank you.
middle
National
of last
Grid,
week.
So,
not Columbia,
if there is
National
a-
Grid.
On National Grid, yeah.
There's a proposal to make a modification. We'll take it now. If not, I'd like to go to a vote. Mr. O'Leary.
Last week I proposed, and again, this puts a little more teeth as far as North Reading's consternation with the situation and how are we going to respond to their applications for permits here in the community. And I think, so just one of the proposals, and I modify it a little bit, but last week I said until National Grid puts, so if you say resolved, until National Grid puts the locked out employees back to work, the administration, because this is a charge to our administration, should coordinate the issuance of permits to National Grid with the Massachusetts Department of Public Utilities, DPU. The town should request inspectors from DPU to provide necessary oversight of all permitted activity. In the absence of DPU assistance, the administration, I'll say, may provide adequate inspectional oversight by appropriately trained town staff or may utilize contracted services. The costs associated with the additional oversight may be added to the permitting fees charged to National Grid. And I put the words may in there because what I tried to do last week too is provide as much flexibility to the administration in relation to the permits that are requested. You know, do we need oversight on just a tie-in to a single-family residence or something, whereas as opposed to maybe the CVS job or the Pulte property. You know, when we don't have the confidence level at this point, to Mrs. Manupelli's statement, you know, we don't know what their game plan is. You know, with everybody that's on the job site has to have certain certifications, but not everybody is proficient. You know, some graduate at the top of the class, some at the bottom of the class. Right now, we're dealing with the bottom of the class. This is the B team that they have out there, and I'm being generous. There's no doubt about it. So we have because of their abdication of their responsibilities, we have a responsibility to force some oversight. The governor quite clearly stated Friday, after his consternation with the other outfit, Columbia Gas, he has the authority of the DPU to come in and take an additional oversight. And we've already asked them to do that. So that's great. So to me, if we just were to add this one little resolution, you know, that until National Grid puts these people back to work, we're going to ask for a little bit more from them. We're going to ask the DPU to get involved. We're going to ask for a little bit more potentially. They won't like that, and that's good, you know? So to me, you know, and as far as, you know, being as equal to the union, you know, they have an obligation, you know, to provide good public safety, and they get the training and certifications necessary to do that and provide a good service for National Grid to our community. They also have a responsibility to their families, and that's what the negotiations come down to. So whether it's pensions and insurance and all the rest, that's between them and National Grid. But National Grid, at this point, has a monopoly here in this community and a lot of other communities, and fall under an umbrella of something almost like a quasi-governmental agency, but they're not. They're an investor-owned outside outfit that makes billions of dollars on the ratepayers here. But they have an obligation, and they are regulated, both federally and state-wise, to provide safe and adequate services and they're unable to do it. So I think
So
if we put this resolution in here as an
I'd like to
amendment,
give the town administrator an opportunity to think about this, or at least respond to it.
I'm just saying may.
Because
so it
it's a
doesn't
charge
have
to the administration, and I certainly, we have the Director of Public Safety and the chief here to, we're kind of putting a little bit more on the administration, so.
Sure. So, we obviously are concerned about any situation that puts us in a position of making any discretionary determination because of the potential outcome. We don't have the expertise here in-house. I think that, there were a lot of great suggestions that were brought up at the last meeting. We've forwarded some of them on. I'm just going to read briefly from the response from Town Council, which I put in the packet and referred the board to earlier this evening when I cited some of these things. So if you just bear with me. Before trying to charge a fee to National Grid, the town would likely need to exhaust its administrative remedies at the Massachusetts DPU. In Council's opinion, the town's likelihood of success at the DPU in terms of getting the DPU to allow the town's cost of inspectors to be charged back to Grid is, I think, likely low. Passing those charges back to National Grid would need to be part of their next gas rate case at the DPU. Council indicated that they would recommend against the town hiring its own inspectors. The expenses, this would expose the town to potential liability, and we would need to determine what the town's authority is to inspect and regulate a service that's already a regulated service at the state and to some extent the federal level. And certainly, Council advised if there were safety issues and concerns to contact the DPU Gas Division, which Selectman Leary, I know you did 2 weeks ago, and I did as well that same day. So there's a significant amount of concern with regard to us altering our role in the approval process for these to begin with. And certainly, if we were talking about something that was discretionary in nature, I would be concerned that it would further expose us to a liability for electing to use the discretion in some cases and not in the others. It becomes very difficult. I certainly understand the intent. I mean, I've been present at all of the meetings, and I think we're all struggling with how we try to resolve this. But I do have to caution the board about taking that liability on.
Mrs. Minipelli.
Okay, I actually specifically stated that at the last meeting was the basis why I could not support the resolve that was submitted by Selectman O'Leary. As much as I agreed with the intent behind it, I specifically said it's putting upon our own administration liability that I wouldn't want to put upon them that's in National Grid's lap. So I think that was confirmed, and we don't need to keep going over it and over again. That's what I stated at the last meeting, which is why I didn't agree to support it. So I'll move to amend the resolve that's been written in, motioned, and seconded to include the following additional provisions. 1, to express the town's intent that National Grid return the locked-out employees to duty while they remain in these contract negotiations with the union. And 2, to amend the resolve to require National Grid to produce its emergency action plan that is in place for our town to address emergency scenarios the town might see, whether they're hypothetical or not. Give us its emergency action plan that's in place now, today. And number 3, to amend the resolve to order National Grid to produce to our public safety officials their updated infrastructure maps or their engineering plans to inform our public safety officials if they need to mobilize in the event of any emergency scenario that occurs.
I'll second that.
I have a motion.
Third.
I have a motion and a second. All those in favor,
I have some discussion.
Yeah.
I have a problem with the first part. 2 and 3, I agree with you. Number 1, I don't know why we're taking sides. I had a number of, and I don't pretend to be in the negotiating room here with National Grid and their union. I've had a number of citizens come to me over the last weekend saying, I read where every other union in the state and the country has approved this except these 2 locals. So, there's blame on both sides here. I don't know why we're singling out National Grid to bring people back to work that won't accept the deal that every other National Grid union has accepted.
What Mrs. Minipelli stated was, bring them back to work while you continue.
While you're
this discussion.
negotiating.
I'm going to agree
Well, what
with
are they going to do for the health care at that point?
You go under the
You maintain
existing,
what they
the
currently have.
expired contract.
That's why they're locked out. That's my point.
Well,
So,
what they wrote
I
to
mean-
us was that they're still offering it, but they have to come out of their own pocket. At least they'll have some wages to
Again,
cover it while they're.
Yeah, I don't agree with
Andrew,
you.
if you go back and read it all, it's really about, it's the people that are the new hires. So there's no new hires because
That's
there's
the
no.
pension issue.
No, and
Yeah.
Insurance too.
And insurance.
Insurance too.
So you can vote no on this, but I'm going to ask for a vote on it because we need to move on. We're closing this discussion in 3 minutes, one way or another, because we have a lot of town business to get to.
I'll give you everything except the first part of the amendment.
We have a motion, we had it second. Mr. Gilbert.
Mr. Chairman, I know you're trying to certainly resolve through this issue, but I do need to ask the fire chief, the police chief, and the public works director, just if there's any concern they want to express on those 3 particular items. I didn't see anything that jumps out at me with regard to it, but I just want to confirm that with you folks.
I have no objection.
No objection at all. I mean, my concern would be getting the most qualified people back to work to handle any emergency that comes up within the town.
Thank you, gentlemen. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, for the
Mrs.
courtesy.
Fillmore, I'm going to give you a quick opportunity to come to the podium.
This gentleman has his hand up first, so I'm going to...
Mr. Monahan has addressed this board on many occasions, and I just don't see there's going to be any additional information that's going to change.
He was invited back last meeting.
I understand,
Right,
but
and he probably has some input. Pat Fillmore, the thing is, it's a public safety thing. We're not saying, National Grid has locked out its employees. They didn't ask to, they didn't go on strike. This is a public safety issue. God forbid what happened up in Andover, Lawrence, and North Andover happened here. And if you remember, if you heard the statements from the Columbia representative,
could you
on
please speak with
Friday
to the microphone? Just for the folks at home, can't hear
on
you.
Friday night, if you heard the Columbia representative on Friday night
We
saying,
did.
coming on board saying, well, we contracted out somebody because we didn't have the personnel to do it. Who did they contract? This is what National Grid is going to do. We don't know how qualified these people are. Yes, they have their certification, but have they had any on-the-job training? Have they been in the field on the job for a week after they got their certification? It's a public safety thing.
I
And
believe
I
the
would hate to
resolution
see,
that we have it forward and that we've just modified is in the right direction.
but you're saying, what I'm hearing from you is that it's the workers that went on strike. It's not the workers. They got locked out.
Mrs. Fillmore, you completely misheard me. And I think what you're going to find here is what I'm trying to say is it's both parties. So don't label me as making a statement that's not true.
Okay.
Okay? It's both parties. Mr. Monahan, you please address, if you're going to address this, please come to the podium. I'm going to give you 2 minutes. Not out of disrespect.
Yep.
Just that we've
No,
taken
I
up
understand.
so much town business time on this subject, and the community isn't any safer for
Yep.
all the time that we've taken up at this point.
I understand that. If you'll indulge me in 5 and then,
2 minutes.
okay? Hello, my name is David Monahan. I live at 42 Wilson Ave here in North Reading. I have appeared at the last 3 select committee meetings regarding my urging the committee to impose a National Grid moratorium on non-emergency work. If the committee will indulge me as I asked, I just have a couple things to say. I have lived in North Reading my entire life, and I am a product of that upbringing and what this town has always stood for. We have always looked out for each other and always been taught to do the right thing. Many of the people in this room I owe that to. National Grid locked us out. We offered to continue working on June 25th, and they locked us out. They have replaced us with 633 contractors per their own website and 700 management personnel. The contractors have gas experience, but not in the areas and tasks that National Grid has asked them to complete. The management employees have 0 field experience prior to the lockout. A lot of the debate that has come up since my first appearance before the committee seems to gravitate towards a debate of union versus non-union. This has nothing to do with either. This is purely a knowledge and experience debate involving a very dangerous and sometimes volatile product. Since June 25th, mandated meter changes where safety and leak checks are completed in residents' homes are not being completed. Numerous safety issues are identified during these meter changes, such as carbon monoxide issues, which the fire department deals with on a regular basis. Inspectors are not on site when other contractors work. Like today, I witnessed it at Plating and Sports where the parking lot was being ground up. I spoke with the contractor who was on site all day. He said nobody from National Grid ever appeared as they normally do. There's normally an inspector on site while something like that happens because they ground up over the gas line. So, as I stated earlier, National Grid has roughly 1,300 replacement workers, and they're not completing even the normal work that 1,250 workers complete. That is a fraction of the work. They have stated they are focusing on emergency and compliance work. Not all services they normally conduct. So they have more workers but are completing less work. They have also stated on their website, as Mr. O'Reilly related at the last meeting, we are generally not installing gas service at this time. That's a blatant call that they're not going to get the work that we're looking to get done in North Reading. National Grid has chosen to compromise the service they are providing to all existing residents and customers at this time, utilizing inexperienced replacement workers. I urge you to send a strong message to National Grid and tell them that all residents of North Reading don't want any non-emergency work completed in town until the experienced workforce returns. How can we allow them to increase their customer base in town when they can't provide for and service fully their existing customers? I feel for the projects that may be affected in town, but we need to think of all the residents' customers already being shortchanged on their services. Again, I just urge you, you need to send the strongest message possible to National Grid. The experience needs to return. Thank
Mr.
you.
Bunny, I want to make sure we're clear. There is nobody more qualified than you and your fellow workers that know this town.
Correct.
You know every nick and cranny, you know where all the skeletons are hidden. We know that. We know where you're not out there on the line working, it does put us at risk. There's no doubt about it. But I don't want to send a message to the people in this town that we have a massive public safety issue. We don't, but we will if we continue to let this work go undone. We have to get it done, and that's why this resolution's put forward. I think the modification that's made is strong enough, but the real work is in the community. We need you, Pat, to get out there and get the community calling National Grid. That's where you're gonna make most of your efforts. We need to put the pressure on National Grid. Just like I wrote a letter with my check, you need to write letters with your checks. We need to continue to call the governor's office. We need to continue to call Brad Jones' office. Show the concern. Spending more time at this meeting here is not helping anybody.
I
I'm
agree.
telling you right now. It's going in the transcript when it's done. It's getting put on the shelf and we're moving on. You gotta go beyond this, and we've given this a lot of time.
Yep.
And please don't take my tone as disrespect, but I also have a responsibility as a community to prepare for town meeting, and we have a lot of work to get done. Not that this isn't important, it is, but I hope you understand this resolution
Yep.
is a start. Let's get it done tonight, and then the board members, it's up to you to also advocate on behalf of what we're hopefully gonna approve in this resolution, to get them back to the table. And I agree, there's no reason why you guys shouldn't be back to work while this process continues. None at all.
If I can
It makes no
introduce
sense.
one other thing, just a petition that is signed by all of the first responder, boots on the ground of the fire department. All the union membership signed a petition supporting the moratorium. I can provide that to you if you'd like.
Mr. Schultz.
This morning, I invited you back to get an update on the negotiations. I think you guys are going to meet twice last week. Did that go forward?
They have met twice since we've last year. That is my understanding.
Yeah. Any updates?
None that I've been provided.
Okay, and if you, I'd like you to address this for a second, because I want you guys back to work, we all do. I have gotten comments from a number of people saying your union's kind of the holdout here. Other unions have agreed to what they've offered. How would you speak to that?
Everybody started from a different point, so to say just because we didn't accept something doesn't really mean that, we're even with the other unions. Yes, it's a different endpoint, but there's also different starting points.
Right.
Everybody started with a different contract beforehand.
I just hope the union and National Grid are both looking out for the public's welfare here, both of you guys. Because I just don't want to see our residents suffer because we got two people that are being pig-headed. And that's what it looks like to me.
The issue is it's a lockout. We never chose to step off the job. We would have been at work the entire time if the company would have
I
allowed
understand
us.
the issues are. I just want you guys to get
Mrs.
together.
Minipelli.
Yeah.
I just want to make one last comment with respect to the moratorium. I think it was actually the consensus of the board that wasn't going to resolve anything in terms of this issue that's going on or address the needs of our town either. And it almost gives a pass that, don't come in our community unless it's an emergency. We don't want that. We don't want the ripple effect of that on the current development that's going on. We'd like to see it resolved as quickly as possible, and the moratorium sort of diverges from that.
So, Mr. O'Leary.
Mr. Bonner, you want to present that?
Yep, I'd be happy to give it to you.
Thank you. And again, just in relation to the moratorium, again, my initial reaction was yes, sure, but again, as I looked at it, and we, as I said last week, they've tacitly already put a moratorium in place. They can't service our needs anyway, so past the moratorium is more symbolic. I think this is more to the point as far as the resolution goes, and I think it alerts our elected officials all the way up to the national level. And I think it's, with the proposed amendment, again, it highlights, where we stand as a board and as a community. And just disagree a little bit with you, Mr. Chairman, as far as, the value of what's happened over the last 3 or 4 meetings. I think it's extremely invaluable, only because it's heightened public awareness in our community and hopefully around other communities. I know even Stoneham gets this meeting for some reason or another, I don't know. But hopefully some other people are just paying attention. And I know the social media has covered it a little bit here and talked about it. And I think it's important. And again, this is an important issue that
I think
affects
it's
our
important
community.
what we're doing tonight.
Yeah,
I
so-
think this is important. If we can get this vote done, then we've made a giant step. And then it's up to the community. It really is. It's up to you all to go out there and advocate, because it's many voices.
And
I
so-
wanted to thank you all for your time. I never felt like I was being rushed or anything, so I just wanted to thank you.
I'm sorry for rushing you, but as you know, we have a
Yep,
lot of
no, I
time to do,
understand.
and I
I
know you
understand.
appreciate that.
So, Mr. Chairman, we have a motion before us to amend the resolution as Mrs. Manupelli presented it, and we'll have to share with Jane later on.
Yep. We have a second by, I believe it was Mr. Schultz.
I seconded it.
Oh, you seconded it?
I seconded it.
You, Mr.
So on the amendment.
On the amendment, all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Unanimous.
So now on the main motion
On
as
the main
amended.
motion as amended. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Unanimous.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Once we have it typed up, signed, printed, we'll make sure you get a copy, and it will be on our website, as I stated in the motion. It will be sent out to all those agencies nationally and locally.
And then, I don't know how you want to, the signature page, we'll have to sign a
We're
little
gonna have
later.
to reprint it.
We'll sign it a little later.
We'll come back in, the board members will make a trip by, and we'll
Yep.
sign it, okay?
Perfect, thank you.
Thank you. Okay, next on the agenda, to consider the alteration of the public way known as middle/high school driveway to include a 127 square foot parcel of land formerly part of 193 Park Street. Mr. Gilberto.
Mr. Chairman, through you, the board should vote to approve and sign this order of alteration of layout in advance of the town meeting consideration of the alteration of the layout overall. So this is the first step in the, the second step in this process. The third step will be the action at town meeting to formally alter the layout to include this 127 square feet, which the town will acquire upon the filing of an order of taking as soon as this week. There's a motion in the packet.
So, Mr. Chairman, I move to approve and sign the order of alteration of layout for the public way known as Middle High School Driveway.
I have a motion, a second by Mrs. Minupelli. Any discussion? None heard. All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Unanimous. Wastewater, water discussions.
Mr. Chairman, through you, this article, this item was placed on the agenda for this evening's meeting. I should apologize to the public. I am battling a cold, if you can't tell. That's why my voice sounds this way.
A lot of us just thought you reached puberty. Sorry. I'm sorry. I had to lighten the mood here. It was getting a little tight.
There's a flag on the play.
I'll take it as a compliment to my youth. How's that?
Besides Gene, you're the second youngest.
And keep your distance.
So this is, I think, an important discussion, and it relates back to the warrant, and in particular, warrant article number 13, relative to the planning and design for a wastewater collection system. We've had some discussion here as a board along the process for the Andover IMA about expanded wastewater through Andover to the Greater Lawrence Sanitary District. This funding would effectively, if approved at town meeting, would allow us to conduct a further evaluation and study of Andover's wastewater collection system for the ability to transfer wastewater from the North Reading town line through Andover to Greater Lawrence Sanitary District. And so during our working meetings relative to the water and wastewater project with Selectman O'Leary, Selectman Masseri, DPW Director Bauer, and Water Superintendent Clark, we've been looking at options, and I think, and I guess the Selectman can correct me if I'm wrong, the intention here was to just discuss the scope of what that would look like and make sure that we're all in agreement prior to us finalizing a scope and having an actual cost estimate. So again, I think the scope that we're looking at is to further study the Andover system, the improvements that might need to be made, and some may remember the effort that we followed in Reading when we were looking at their water system, about the improvements that needed to be made in their water system to take water from their, from the Stoneham line through their system to a potential pump station on Mill Street, which of course now we're not intending to construct because of the extended IMA with Andover. So it's a similar exercise, but on the wastewater side. I don't have a cost estimate with regard to it, but this was more discussion to affirm that everyone agrees that that's the next phase of this, and that's the intention of the board. Mr. Messeri, Mr. O'Leary, did I summarize that okay?
Well done.
So I just want to, I really mention it here rather than under old and new business. So tomorrow night, the Economic Development Committee is going to be meeting, and we're going to be talking about two things. And first is going to be meeting with somebody from the governor's office from the Economic Development to discuss tax incentives. You know, what they would look like, what we could draft up and propose to the board for consideration for tax incentives that could go along with the potential growth opportunities when we get wastewater. I know it's a little bit in advance of where we are with all this, but it's again, we're trying to keep everything parallel. So we're going to study the opportunity for tax incentives for economic development in our commercial areas. I welcome and join, for all of you to join us in that discussion tomorrow night. And again, it's just top-level discussions with a member
Time
from
is it, 7?
6 in room 5. And then we will also continue to have our discussion about when is the right time to have a public workshop to discuss wastewater with our commercial property owners on Main Street and Concord Street. And I'm certainly going to rely on you, Mr. O'Leary and Mr. Messeri, on when you think that right time is. We are working on, we're going to try to work on a diligent list of good contacts, because as you know, that's harder than it sounds. And that's what we're going to be working on. In the meantime, too, you tell us it's time to get that media out there, get the workshop set up, because I believe strongly that communication on this topic is very important now and long into the future, because we need the commercial property owners' support as we go through this process. So I welcome you to attend tomorrow night's meeting.
So just in relation to what we're talking about, I think it's important that that everybody understand, and I know the board members do from our previous discussions on water with Andover, as part of the deal was to talk about and get them to embrace the idea of expanding our ability to tie into Greater Lawrence Sewer. Along with that, it's going to take some sort of upgrades through the town of Andover. So before we can pump anything out of this town, that town needs to be assessed as far as, the needs and quantified exactly what our exposure may be. And then from there, we need to look at how are we going to implement here, phasing it in certain segments. So, what we're looking for is a consensus from the board that, we're going to charge our consultants to go up and further engage, and Mark and Patrick to further engage the people up in Andover sooner rather than later.
Right.
In relation to this project, and that, so that we can get as much information necessary to make an informed decision as to what we have to invest up there before we can start anything here. So it's the board's consensus and wishes, we'll proceed down that path. And then in the meantime, we're also going to, Mr. Messeri's undertaken the task of looking at every single parcel and frontage and maybe trying to quantify, what is it going to cost, and how do we, once we get the cost quantified, how do we split it up, and what's the exposure going to be to the individual property owners. So we're just looking to make sure that everybody here on the board is on the same page as to how we're progressing. We need to engage Andover now, so that we can find out what we need to do, and then further look at how are we going to implement here in town. What's the best way of doing it, most cost-effective way of doing it in relation to return on the investment, so we can start getting some cash flow coming back in, and then put a timeline associated with it. Further on down the road, we're looking at, how far do we want to go? Obviously, we're looking going down Concord Street, just a question of, what are we going to do in the Southwick Road area, in that area also. But that's a little bit down the road.
Yep. We still engaging with Wright Pierce on
Yes.
this? Okay.
Yep.
And that contract is still on, I don't know what the
Well,
expiration.
they're still doing FEIR and stuff and this is part of it.
wanna
Wastewater is
make
part of
sure.
the FEIR.
Okay.
So as we move forward, we'll have a more definitive plan in our presentation to the FEIR as to what we're going to be doing.
Mr. Gilberto, you had,
Just a comment relative to the procurement. So the design of public works infrastructure, such as this collection systems that we're talking about, is actually exempt from the process to contract under state law. However, the town selection process actually predates my arrival here in town. Wright Pierce has been on board since at least early 2014, if not earlier. So when we contract for these things, they submit a proposal to us, we bring it forward for funding, and then we execute a contract for the specific scope. So we've probably had between 6 and 9 different contracts signed with them over the past 4 years.
yeah, I just brought it up because I want to make sure as we go into town meeting that there wasn't anything that we were missing, to make sure that Mr. O'Leary and Mr. Messeri still had the adult supervision to help them get through this.
We have
because-
Mark.
Yes, you do. Mr. Messeri.
In the work that Wright Pierce did with respect to the DEIR going to the FEIR,
Yep.
there's a lot of information that will lead us into, one, being able to present to the community what our overall intent is and schedule,
Yep.
and come up with the cost factors associated with it. And also give us an opportunity to look and review all of that and determine, is this the path we need to go and how we're gonna go about doing it? What is necessary right in this time frame is to move ahead with looking at the Andover work that has to be done,
Yeah, it's
while we
important.
still have their attention.
Yep.
And they have made a commitment to help us with sewer, and we need to do that as soon as possible. And that's why the article's in the warrant.
Great. Anything else?
I don't know, Mark, did we leave anything out? I mean, you need full disclosure here, so anything?
Very quick, but yeah, I was still going.
Oh,
Okay.
you forgot about the location for chlorine.
Well, that's,
Yeah.
okay, yep. So in relation to, we're looking to have some chlorinating plants. When we have a site over in Central Street that we own, we're looking for a site on Main Street. We thought we had a site that we could use. There appears to be some potential problems in relation to conservation land and floodplains. So we're looking at some alternative sites, which expect to have more information gathered this week. And then we'll be approaching some other property owners as far as the feasibility of siting it somewhere in the same area, same neighborhood. The closer to the line, the better. So we ran into a little bit of a glitch, but that's all right, not unexpected either. So if it went that smoothly, I'd be concerned.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Me too. Okay. And anything else?
Um,
good.
We're going to talk about the warrant article when it comes up?
Yep. That's
Sure,
coming up
yes.
Okay.
on
That was the
13. We're going to move on to number 12, approve and sign the Verizon Cable Franchise License Agreement.
Mr. Chairman, as I indicated in the updated meeting notes for this evening, we did receive the draft contract from Verizon. It is now pending with the Cable Advisory Committee. They have not been able to have a meeting to review it in advance of this evening's meeting, so the recommendation is to pass over the item until at least the next meeting, October 1st.
Okay, we'll pass on that one over. Continue to review and discuss October town meeting warrant articles and vote recommendations. Mr. Gilberto.
Mr. Chairman, through you, we ordinarily have a PowerPoint presentation that we go through at this stage of the warrant article review, but as you'll see as we're going through this process, there are a number of things that are just not, for which we don't have numbers or don't have enough information to be able to advance the discussion too far. So rather than go through the PowerPoint presentation, I'd rather go article by article, and I'll offer my recommendation for the board to determine how
Sure.
it sees to proceed. So starting with Article 1, to hear and act on reports of town officers and committees. Recommendation would be to recommend. And I believe there's a motion in the packet to accordingly.
This is Article 1.
Article 1, correct.
Mr. Chairman, I move to recommend Article 1, hear and act on reports of town officers and committees.
Second.
I have a motion and a second by Mrs. Minipelli. Any discussions? None heard? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Unanimous. Article 2.
Article 2 is prior year bills. Right now, I don't have the details of particular bills that are on there, but we would ask the board to recommend the warrant article, and we'll bring those forward as soon as they're available.
So we won't make a recommendation tonight.
You want to recommend a town meeting?
The board could recommend a town meeting, certainly, if it so chose.
Do we have an idea? I mean, they're not big
I'm sorry?
chump change, little stuff.
Why don't we recommend a town meeting? I
Mr.
can't-
Chairman, I move to recommend at town meeting, make a recommendation at town meeting of Article 2 prior year bills.
Second.
I have a motion, a second by Mr. Schultz. Any discussion? None had. All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Unanimous.
Article 3, a transfer of funds to the Capital Improvement Stabilization Fund. Under the town's capital improvement plan, our transfer in would be in the amount of $200,000. We're still working on certifying available free cash from the closeout of last year. We hope to have that information certified by the end of this week, but I would encourage the board to recommend Article 3.
Mr. Chairman, I move to recommend Article 3, transfer of funds to Capital Improvement Stabilization Fund.
Second.
I have a motion, a second by Mrs. Minipelli. Any more discussion? Excuse me, you said it was 200,000?
$200,000 under the town's multi-year capital improvement plan.
Okay. Any other discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Unanimous.
Article 4 would be to appropriate money to the stabilization fund. I have talked with the finance director, and again, subject to that certification of available free cash, we are looking to make a recommendation to transfer funding into the stabilization fund. The dollar amount right now is not known as we continue to evaluate the other costs, but it is our intention to recommend to the board a transfer in, and I would expect it to be a transfer in excess of $100,000. So I would ask the board to recommend this article if it's so willing at this point.
Mr. Chairman, I move to recommend Article 4, appropriate money to stabilization fund.
Second.
I have a motion, a second by Mr. Misery. Any discussion? None had. All those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Unanimous.
Article 5, the transfer funds to other post-employment benefits liability trust fund. We continue to make transfers into this fund at the June town meeting. We have not historically made a transfer in at the October town meeting, and at this point, we are not projecting to recommend a transfer in, so I'd recommend the board recommend a town meeting, Article 5.
Mr. Chairman, I move to recommend at town meeting Article 5, make a recommendation at town meeting. Article 5, transfer of funds to other post-employment benefit liability trust fund.
Motion, a second by Mrs. Minipelli. Any discussion? None heard. All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Unanimous.
Article 6 is to appropriate money to the participating funding arrangement fund. We do not have a certified dollar amount yet. We're still waiting for the closeout of the health insurance year and the information from our third-party provider, and also to share that information with our insurance advisory committee. However, I would encourage the board to recommend this article because we do intend to make a transfer.
Mr. Chairman, I move to recommend Article 6, appropriate money to participating funding arrangement fund.
Second.
I have a motion, a second. Any discussion? None heard. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Unanimous.
Article 7, it would amend the fiscal year 2019 operating budget, and I believe the board's custom is to recommend at town meeting this article when the most information is known with regard to the particular transfers. So I'd encourage you to recommend this article at town meeting.
Mr. Chairman, I move to recommend at town meeting Article 7, amend fiscal year 2019 operating budget.
Motion, do I have a second?
Second.
Second by Mr. Schultz. Any discussion? None heard. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Unanimous.
Article 8, amend the fiscal year 2019 capital expenditures. As I've mentioned before, this is an article that we don't customarily bring up. It's proposed to be administrative in nature, housekeeping to correct the items that you see listed on the page of the warrant. In the case of the technology, instructional equipment, we inadvertently identified the source of funds as free cash when it should have been capital improvement stabilization funds. And in the case of recreation center paving and the IRP walkways, we incorrectly identified them as the Parks and Rec Enterprise Fund when they should have been identified as Parks and Rec retained earnings. And I would encourage the board to recommend this article.
Mr. Chairman, I move to recommend Article 8, amend fiscal year 2019 capital expenditures.
Second.
I have a motion, a second by Mr. Schultz. Any discussion? None heard. All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Unanimous.
Article Article 9 relates to the funding of repairs to town buildings, and we are anticipating making a recommendation for improvements to some HVAC systems in this building, the town hall, most notably the air conditioning in room 14, as well as the heat. We're looking at a unit that would address both in maybe a more efficient manner than the original mini-split system that we have on the wall over there, as
And the
well
clanging
as the
over
clanging
there, yeah.
hamster-operated heat.
I think my
So-
suit is stuck to me right now.
Yeah.
So that is the intention. I'll go through the additional detail when we go through the warrant, but I'd encourage the board to recommend the article.
Mr. Chairman, I move to recommend Article 7, fund repairs to town buildings.
Second.
9.
I'm sorry, Article 9.
Article 9, excuse me, it says Article 7, Article 9, correct.
I got a
Thank
motion.
you.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Second by Mr. Schultz. Any discussion? Mrs. Minipelli?
I believe it's going to be $50,000, but...
Historically,
oh,
that's what it's been.
I'm sorry, bear with me 1 minute, Mr. Chairman. I do see that I have an update, so I can confirm that number.
Of course, if we
So
get
we-
more comfortable, we may spend more time here. Our
So-
meetings may go longer.
I do have the detail here. I apologize. As usual, Ms. Spur Knight
The
was on
town
top
won't
of
be
things.
safe. We're better off smoking us out here.
Yeah.
The specific improvements, the room 14 upgrades to HVAC system, $15,000. Conservation and Planning Office, HVAC, approximately $20,000. Removal of conservation planning, old equipment, and related carpentry, $3,000. And related wiring, $6,000. And then we've, of course, included a contingency in there for a total of $50,000.
I would just ask, when we go to the public hearings on these, the next meeting, that we just get an update on where we are with the $50,000 that
Sure.
we approved last October.
Certainly.
Okay.
So we have a motion.
We have a motion and a second, and we haven't voted, right?
Correct.
Correct.
All right. Anything else? None heard. All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Unanimous.
Article 10, funding for survey, engineering, design, and/or construction for a portion of Swan Pond Road. By way of an update, we are still in the process of gathering the right of entry forms, and not to put the DPW director on the spot, but do we have an indication of how far along we are with obtaining sign-offs?
Mr. Bauer?
We have at this time, have been able to secure the majority of those, but we have one resident in particular that has an issue with the language, so we're sort of working that out at this time. And so obviously it's, all it takes is one to cause a wrinkle, but we're continuing to work on that and see if we can find some language that they'll be satisfied with.
So once that activity is complete, or if it's not able to be complete, if we need to make an alteration to the work plan somehow, we'll be able to proceed with the actual surveying that needs to be done and the report. And just to remind folks, the intention was to get an estimate of the cost for the stormwater improvements, which would then be added to the already fairly well identified cost of paving the existing dirt way that's out there at this point in time. As I mentioned earlier, the language has been written as broadly as possible. And in the absence of any clear authority for a so-called betterment on this, we have this language that potentially conditions it upon contribution from abutting property owners. So we've written it that way as such. In light of all of that, I think the only choice we have available to us at this point is a recommendation at town meeting.
So, Mr. Chairman, I move to recommend at town meeting, Article 10, appropriate funds for survey, engineering design, and/or construction of a portion of Swan Pond Road.
Second.
I have a motion and a second by Mr. Schultz. Any more discussion? None heard. All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Unanimous.
So we're
Article.
going to do, 11 is 12 and 12 is 11 now, right?
Correct, yes. So we would now be on appropriating funds for the water system improvements for acquisition of water system property. And we'll just provide a general overview, and this again reflects some discussions that have taken place with regard to the water and wastewater working group of Selectmen Leary and Masseri, the DPW director and the water superintendent. So just to, again, remind folks, at the June town meeting, we requested funding in the amount of $3 million for construction of the interconnection, for construction of improvements associated with the interconnection with Andover, to take the additional flow of water to bring us up to 100% of our capacity. We've also been awarded a $3 million grant from the state's MassWorks program that is for improvements associated with this connection to Andover. And so what we've been looking at is not only the improvements that we know we need to do for Andover, which would, for the Andover connection, which would be that rechlorination facility both at Main and Central Streets, and a limited amount of main work, the property acquisition that we've talked about, but we've also tried to look at some work on the water mains that may be on the horizon and could be addressed at the same point in time, that, while maybe not necessary when we were discussing the receipt of water, the conveyance of the additional water from Andover, it may be to our advantage to do it. So Wright Pierce is looking at that in consultation with the DPW director and the water superintendent, but the intention would to identify a single appropriation of up to a total of $6 million to be reduced by the receipt of the state grant funding, which we know to be $3 million, and make these improvements all at once. And again, just a point of reference, this is compared to the potential total project cost that we were looking at with the MWRA of approximately $14 million. So that's the thinking that's come out of the working group's discussions here, and that's updated as of last week. And in doing that, we'd have a singular appropriation that we'd be working off of. In the article following it, we would rescind the authorizations to borrow that were associated with the MWRA project and approved in June of 2017. Trying to keep the years and dates correct. So that was the thinking at this point. That was the intention at this point. And Selectman Messeri and O'Leary, if I've misstated that, certainly correct me, to the DPW director or to Mr. Clark. If you have anything to add, feel free.
No, and Mr. Chairman, it's just important to recognize that, we have certain improvements that need to be made in relation to Andover, certain improvements identified that we're going to have to make anyway in the short term. And in order to get reimbursed for the grant money, we have to appropriate the money first.
Right.
So we've already appropriated somewhere around $3 million before, so we're looking for the additional $3 million. We're looking for the whole $6 million to get the projects done on a short timeline, have the appropriation available so we don't have to keep going back to town meeting to get it done. And again, we're looking to have the $6 million offset by the $3 million.
Right. I think at town meeting, we should just be prepared to reference back to what we're rescinding so people can see the magnitude of the differences. And I
Sure.
think it'll help us get through this discussion.
I agree, and I excluded in that discussion, but it's a great point, Mr. Chairman. There was an article in October of 2017 for the buy-in to the MWRA, and that was another $7-ish million.
So we're going to be rescinding all of that.
Correct.
Okay. So we're going to make a recommend.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, I move to recommend Article 12, appropriate funds for water system improvements and for acquisition of water system property.
Just a correction, it's actually Article 11 now.
Excuse me, that's
Sorry.
11.
You said you up there, Mr. O'Leary, sorry.
No, I know. I had it okay up here. They didn't change that. So, again, move to recommend
Okay.
Article 11, appropriate funds for water system improvements and for acquisition of water systems, and Mr. Messeri seconded it.
I have a motion. I have a second by Mr. Messeri. Any more discussion? None heard. All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Unanimous. Article 12,
Which was 11, okay.
Yes, sir.
rescind authorization to borrow.
I think we just talked about that.
We
so-
did, yes. As explained, it'll be rescinding not only the water articles, but there may be other projects for which the funding is no longer needed because the
Recommended
project's
town
complete.
meeting.
I'm sorry?
Recommended town meeting.
I believe you can recommend at this point in time. If we have additional projects besides those water ones, you may want to revote it, but we generally carry this, and we don't necessarily always act on it, so it's really up to the board. But the articles that we intend to recommend be rescinded are the water articles. There may be others that come up.
Okay, Mr. Chairman, I move to recommend Article 12, rescind authorization to borrow.
Second.
Second by Mr. Messeri. Any more discussion? None heard. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Unanimous.
Mr. Chairman, through you, Article 13, relative to the planning and design for a wastewater collection system. I'm sorry, just more for the record, I know I said it earlier, but included in the new Article 11 is the authority to acquire and expend funds for the acquisition of property for that second rechlorination station. I think we said that already, but I want to make sure it's clear. We combined two articles to have that in it.
Article 11.
In Article 11, correct. Article 13, which is the wastewater collection system, I think we spoke earlier about it. This would be funding for the design. I don't have a cost estimate at this point in time. I'm not aware that DPW has raised one at this point. I think the intention was to get the feedback from the board and then to go forward with getting that estimate. So the board may wish to elect to recommend it at town meeting in the absence of a dollar amount. If it wants to make a policy statement about the commitment, then it certainly could recommend it at this point in time.
To me, I would like to alert the public that we're in favor of moving forward in negotiating with it, finding what we need to do with Andover in order to move this thing forward, so, you know.
I think we should do it.
And so I think we should recommend it, and if something comes in overly alarming, we can always change our mind.
Yeah.
A
Mr.
quick question, Mr. O'Leary, does the recent events in Andover any way going to impact the timeframe on this, or?
Yeah, but maybe we can replace some gas lines while we're digging up the street, I don't
Mr.
know.
Gilbert.
I mean, we'll note that we had intended to have some dialogue informally with the town manager before, but the timing was such that I just didn't feel it
I
was
mean, I
fair
know
to
they're
burn
dealing with a
them.
ton of stuff right
Yeah,
now.
right.
Yeah.
So they would have, I mean, if they're watching this meeting, which I don't think they are, but they would have heard from us, but we're aware that they're busy with other things. And we have been in touch with them, but just not
But
on this.
everything we do in
No.
our designs have to have a contingency plan. I think that's sort of a little lesson learned.
Sure.
You know, that maybe not natural gas related, maybe diesel or something like that.
But again, the subcommittee, we had discussed having a meeting with, have the administration meet with them first, and then the subcommittee meet afterwards, but obviously the recent events pushed that timeline back.
Okay.
So, Mr. Chairman, I move to recommend Article 13, authorize and appropriate funds for acquisition of water system property.
Second.
I have a motion and a second by Mrs. Minipelli. Any more discussion? None heard. All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Unanimous. 14.
Article 14 would be to appropriate money for special counsel legal expenses associated with the secondary school building project.
What am I looking at here? Hold on.
You went ahead, Mike.
Oh,
Did
I jump ahead?
This is water system property.
so this is combined into the
All right,
new
so this one
12.
should be, so this should be passed over?
It's not on the
It's
draft,
not on
it's
the-
not on the warrant at this point.
Okay, so I'm sorry. So this one, so this is 13, okay, I'm sorry. Very good. So I read the wrong motion, you guys voted on the wrong thing. Thank you for your trust. Let's see. Mr. Chairman, I move to recommend Article 13, so that was okay. Appropriate funds for planning and design of wastewater collection systems.
Second?
I thought we already did.
No, I read the wrong article, one that was in the draft here. So, that was
Sorry.
I believe we have a motion for an article that was taken off the warrant. I think
Right.
that's the issue.
correct.
Which one?
13.
There, it was.
So we're
it was a-
revoting
So
13.
we're revoting 13 based upon what the language should be, not what I read.
So 13 is 14 in our meeting back.
Correct.
So I have a motion and a second by Mr.
Mrs.
Schultz.
Manupelli, Mrs. Manupelli,
Oh, Mrs. Minipelli.
I'm not.
Yep.
following.
and you just
Okay.
voted.
The motion
Sorry,
we read
I-
for Article 13 originally was the
It's
wrong.
now 14.
motion. For the record, we're going to read in the correct motion and revote it.
Oh,
And you seconded that.
And you
I
seconded
did.
it.
Yes,
Yes, you
I-
did.
And then,
We're recommending, right?
Yes,
yes, aye.
Design of wastewater collection system.
Yes.
it was voted 5-0.
Okay.
Okay.
Article 14.
Article 14, the appropriation of money for special counsel legal expenses associated with the secondary school building project. The board may wish to make a policy statement in favor of the article, or may wish to hold off until we're closer to town meeting and we know more about the dollar amount associated. It's the board's pleasure.
I think we should recommend the article
Yeah.
tonight.
We're gonna
We may not have a dollar amount,
Yep.
but I think it's important that we make the recommendation this evening.
Mr. Chairman, I move to recommend Article 14, appropriate money for special counsel legal expenses.
Second.
I have a motion and a second by Mrs. Minipelli. Any more discussion?
Just Do we want any more? I think at this point, this is for public's consumption. This is, again, to support the ongoing legal battles in relation to the secondary, for the middle school, high school project. And it's ongoing, and it's going to continue going for another probably year and a half, but we'll see. And
I think
we're going to be asking for more money.
We're making great progress.
Yep.
And I feel very good about recommending this article.
I'm sorry, who seconded that?
Mrs. Minipelli.
Okay.
Any more discussion? None heard? All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Unanimous. Article 15.
Article 15, authorizing the payment in lieu of taxes agreement. So again, this is an agreement with Minuteman/Nextera for the property that RMLD owns within the DPW yard, and it would allow for the completion and authorization of the conditional agreement the board signed with Nextera at the August 20th board meeting. My recommendation would be to recommend.
Mr. Chairman, I move to recommend Article 15, authorized payment in lieu of taxes agreement.
A motion, a second by Mrs. Minipelli. Any more discussion? I just want to say that I think the board's making a great decision. I think this is a great opportunity to really take technology and bring it into town to really save tremendously on our energy costs. And I think from this pilot program, you're going to see a lot more of this in the future. I'm glad we're going to support it. Well, that's it. Anything else? If not, all those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Unanimous. Okay, Article 16, authorized sale of town property for funding the incidental costs, 9 Mill Street.
I couldn't tell you what it was
Yeah,
at this point, because the engineers still
Yeah.
So Article 16, relative to seeking the authority to sell town property and fund the costs incidental to that sale for 9 Mill Street. And again, for the public who may not know, this is the site that was acquired by the town for the construction of a pump station for an interconnection with the town of Reading to draw MWRA water into North Reading. There is a working group that met a few weeks ago that has now been providing guidance through the water superintendent to an engineer to design a layout on that property that would allow us to subdivide the property and sell the portion with the home on it and the driveway on it and retain some upland portion for potential future construction for whatever purpose might be necessary,
public use.
but for a public use. So that's the intention. There was some discussion about whether a zoning change would or would not be recommended. At this point, we don't have a specific zoning change to recommend. We're waiting for that report to come back from the surveyor with the redrawn property lines according to the guidance that we received, and then we'll review that with the board. We hope that that's going to take place at the October 1st meeting. But for now, what we'll be telling the public in the warrant is that we'll be looking to sell all or a portion of that property. And hopefully we'll have an additional delineation of where the property lines might be the evening of town meeting or perhaps at the warrant article hearing. There may be some costs associated with it. We don't know what they are right now, but there may be a recommendation for an appropriation as well.
But either way, the board would need authorization to sell the property.
Correct.
So.
Yep.
We'll move to recommend. Mr.
Recommend.
Chairman, I move to recommend Article 16, correct? 16, authorized sale of town property and funding for incidental cost, 9 Mill Street.
I have a motion. Do I have a second?
Mr.
Mr.
Messeri did.
Messeri. And any discussion? Mrs. Minipelli.
I remember the first plan we saw was just so awkward and strange, and the layouts of the parcels, I know intended to make them conforming. Is that the plan that you were talking about going to be different than that, where
Yeah.
it's going to be more evenly divided lots and?
As Mr. Schultz said, it's not going to look like Cape Cod.
It was awful.
What we're trying to do is split the lot off in the sense that we don't affect the character and nature of the residential area, but yet have enough upland where if we need to do something as far as on the right line, we can. So we're trying to keep the integrity of the residents as well.
And I think this is going to take a quick 1 or 2 slides at town meeting to explain in full.
Yes.
So I think we should just be prepared for that.
Picture will speak 1,000 words.
Yep. Okay. Any other discussion? None heard? All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Unanimous. Article 17.
Mr. Chairman, through you, don't know if the fire chief's staying for a particular item here. You certainly don't have to stay on our account. You're welcome to if you'd like to, though. We love having you here.
All right, thank you very much.
The Open Space and Recreation Plan Consultant, Article 17, this is something that was identified by the town planner and submitted as a warrant article. It's something that we are required to do on a recurring basis. I won't say what the interval is, but I believe that it's between 5 and 10 years. We are recommending it be addressed at this town meeting because of the fact that we may not be in a position to fund it in June town meeting, dealing with the operating budget at that point in time. And waiting till next October won't give us enough time to complete the plan in a timely fashion before the current plan expires. At least that's my understanding.
What's the rough number?
I believe we're talking $25,000 approximately. So I know that the board has not had a lot of discussion about this. It certainly could opt to hold off on a recommendation, but it is something, the value in the plan is not only for planning purposes, but it's also something that the state looks for when you're a candidate for
Correct.
state funding.
We need
And-
this.
Yeah, we
and
need
so
it.
To continue to get grant funds.
in my, sorry.
Where is the funding going to come from?
In all honesty, we haven't identified a funding source at this point for it. Yeah, the funding source could be any source of available funds. It could include free cash. It would be unlikely to include raise and appropriate. Could be a transfer from stabilization or other fund. It could be funded out of the Parks and Recreation enterprise. It could be funded out of the retained earnings. There's any number of funding options that are out there that this, I think, would fit within. And through you, Mr. Chairman, if I could just further add that we're all well aware that we've been the beneficiary of some work on our behalf by Representative Jones. One of those things is a grant for $500,000 for improvements to Ipswich River Park. It's in a bond bill, which means that the authorization is there, but the funding actually needs to be released by the state administration. We don't have any timeline for when that might happen. So it's not in the immediate future, we don't think, but regardless, I would think we would be expected to be current with our plan at that point in time.
Yep.
We're gonna need it.
So, Mr. Chairman, I move to recommend Article 17, Fund Open Space and Recreation Plan Consultant.
Second by Mrs. Minipelli. Any more discussion? None heard. All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Unanimous.
Article 18, to fund the feasibility study for the pedestrian bicycle pathway. This was an article submitted by the Land Utilization Committee in June. They were asked to support passing the article over until we might have more information about a funding source, which we're hopeful to have here in October, the October town meeting. The cost is $55,000, or not, the cost isn't expected to exceed $55,000, but we expect the appropriation will be for the full $55,000. We're still working on that funding source, and I know there was a meeting with the Finance Committee the other night with regard to that to brief them as well. We've met with the Land Utilization Committee representative, Mr. Hertz, who's put quite a bit of effort into this. But this would be the next step, going from the sort of master plan to feasibility level. The master plan is a number of years old, I believe, at this point. So this would be the next step. And it's required for us. We ultimately, I think the thinking is that this project, which from what I understand has a construction cost of between $7 and $9 million, it would be a candidate for funding through the State Transportation Improvement Program and or other state/federal grant funding. Most of those programs require that you have the project designed for it to be submitted to the list. The design is going to be a more extensive cost, but this would be the next step in working towards that.
So before we have a motion, I just have to ask a quick question, because it's my understanding that the feasibility to get this done, we have to go over private property. And if we have to go through private property, there's no way you're going to get any grant funding. I just can't see, I've never seen it happen before.
I could actually speak to that. To go one step back, the grant money is actually federally based, but it's state administered, and they're getting this from the federal. If we're able to do this, we'd have to come up with the feasibility study money and a portion of the design cost. The whole construction project would be covered. And it would run along pretty much along the rail bed, along the river, the old rail bed there. Mr. Hertz I've sat with him, and he's isolated every single property that would be on the proposed route. I think there'd be 3 or 4 parcels that would be problematic, we'd have to get easements on, but that's what the feasibility study is gonna tell us, is how we can do it, what the cost would be, so on, and how we would, whether that's possible or not. This is actually a possibility. A lot of it's going to go through wetland, and what they do is they actually build it on a boardwalk, so it's above the wetland. And again, the construction cost is covered. And I think it's the Ipswich River Watershed Association. They're on board with this as well. But there are going to be 3 or 4 properties, I think, that are going to be troublesome, that we're going to have to find either a workaround or work something out with that homeowner.
Mrs. Minipelli.
I think Mr. Hurd said 50% of the parcels are privately owned, that this would be going
Yeah,
through.
see, a lot of them would go through like the wetland area, so it really wouldn't, I don't think, he doesn't feel it's gonna be a hard time. There's 3 or 4, like North Reading Auto Body's one that's gonna be problematic. There are a few other homeowners that is right there. A lot of it is town-owned land. But that's what the feasibility study would address, is how to deal with those issues.
But, I mean, Mr. O'Leary, you've been doing this a long time. A project like this, that you have to rely on going through privately owned property. I mean, I just don't want to waste the money on the feasibility study if you just don't see this really. I don't know how it can take place there's a lot more than 3.
No, that would be problematic. Now, see, a lot of these, it would go through the wetland area in the back, where I don't think it's gonna be a hard time. These actually increase the value of the property when you're on a rail trail, from the real estate standpoint.
When you're talking some commercial property, I don't see how it benefits.
We'll probably have to route around there, yeah, if it's a commercial property, but for residential, it does benefit.
I haven't,
Yeah.
I haven't seen the plan, I guess, yet, have we?
It's just the rail trail.
Yeah, but I'm trying to,
He-
where?
He
Where-
did draw it up, and he's been meeting with everyone. He came to the committee meeting. Actually, I didn't see it either.
No, I mean,
He
so I'm,
connected with
I'd
me
rather
to
wait.
to
Can we
sit.
hold off on this one for town meeting? Can we
yeah,
recommend
yeah,
town
I think we should recommend, I would like to see
Yeah.
the,
Why don't
The
we
route.
invite him into our next meeting?
yeah, well, I think that would be appropriate.
Yeah.
Yeah, just so what I,
I'm super, yeah.
Yeah, you'll be surprised the work he's done on this when you see it. I was.
We made a town meeting.
yeah, so I think make a recommendation to town meeting, and absolutely, I mean, I would like to see, and if we can get it ahead of time, to take a look at it.
Can we get him on the agenda for,
Is council involved at all because we're talking about because we're talking about going through private properties in this discussion?
we haven't gotten that far. Yeah, we're just at the feasibility study stage.
So, through you, Mr. Chairman, the board's scheduled to have warrant article hearings at the October 1st meeting. It's probably the best opportunity to speak with the petitioner.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, all right, so, this is, again, Article what, 19? 18. 18, I gotta change that, Article 18. Mr. Chairman, I move to make a recommendation at town meeting, Article 18, fund feasibility study for pedestrian bicycle pathway.
For a second.
A motion, a second by Mr. Minipelli. Any more discussion? None heard. All those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Unanimous. Article 19.
Article 19 is the alteration of the layout for the middle high school driveway, and it would be town meeting's action to expand the layout from the existing driveway to include the property that we're in the process of acquiring from the abutting property owner at the corner of middle high school driveway and Park Street. And my recommendation would be to recommend.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, I move to recommend Article 19, alteration of layout, middle high school driveway.
Second.
I have a motion and a second by Mr. Schultz. Any more discussion? None heard. All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Unanimous.
Mr. Chairman, through you, I believe Articles 20 and 21 go hand in hand in terms of the discussion. I'll speak to Article 20 first. I know that there's been a series of meetings between the Public Safety Director, the Public Works Director, Selectman Schultz, and representatives of the business community. And at this point, from the administration at least, we don't have a recommendation relative to language to alter the bylaw. I've spoken with the police chief. I think he's indicated in previous meetings that we felt that with the adjustments that we made the last time we adjusted this article, this bylaw, we saw a significant increase in compliance. Chief, I think you've said upwards of 90% compliance in last season. And so at this point, we don't have a recommendation for an alteration, although obviously we're aware of Article 21 and the fact that there is a proposal that would eliminate the requirement altogether from the bylaw. It would also eliminate some other components of the bylaw, although I'm not sure that was the intent necessarily. So that might be addressed through a motion on the floor of town meeting, if that were the case.
So there's been multiple meetings on this subject, Mr. Schultz, I think you've hosted on, as the liaison for the board, and you're saying there's no proposal that's come out of those meetings?
We've kicked 9 million things around, and I believe, I don't want to speak for the DPW director, but I believe there's a question where you're concerned about them having the manpower, the logistical ability to do this. For a number of reasons. One, you think you feel you would need a new, correct me if I'm wrong, you feel you need a new machine, a third machine to do it. I've met with the business community ad nauseum. Mr. Evans and Mr. Venezia is here tonight, I can see, on behalf of the business community. We're, honestly, this thing is a conundrum. It's very similar to what we discussed with National Grid in the sense that we keep going over and over it and can't seem to find something that's workable. And it's not from a lack of effort. Everyone's put a lot of time into this. I appreciate everyone's help, both at town hall and in the business community. But I just think at this point, we're gonna have dueling petitions at town meeting.
Mr. Gilberto.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and certainly the Public Safety Director or the Public Works Director can interrupt me if I'm misstating it. I think we did make a good faith effort to look at what it would take for the town to take on the responsibility, obviously subject to discussion here from a policy standpoint with the board, and obviously subject to appropriation at town meeting as well. And I think there was certainly that there is a cost, and to some extent the cost is, to potentially a great extent, the cost is variable depending upon the type of snowfall that we're talking about, and the sequencing of storms, how close together they happen. And I'm well aware that these are all certainly concerns that the business community is also addressing. But then there was a second factor that we struggled with, which is obtaining the equipment that we need to do, which, as Mr. Schultz indicated, would be a third sidewalk snow removal piece of equipment, personnel or contractors. And I commend the Public Works Director because he took a bit of a different approach and said, how could I shuffle resources around so that maybe we could handle it in-house. That brings challenges in terms of if we were to do that. The first is that we're not generally in that area for a protracted effort. We do a couple of the parcels that are there, and then we're back to the other areas that we're addressing. But I think certainly not illogical to think, well, could we do more there? But it would be a significant investment. But the other concern we have is, and you'll see in the town administrator's report a little bit later on, just identifying personnel, hiring personnel. We have struggled mightily. We still have not been able to fill 100% of the positions that we were looking at. I think we were there for maybe a month that we had them all filled, and now we're back down a position again. And we're a victim of the construction market that's out there. It's a very busy market right now. The same holds true for the contractors. We're down between 5 and 10 contractors since 2016. I think you're aware in 2016-2017 season, former Director Moylan recommended that we raise the rates in order to try to attract some folks. It addressed it a little bit, but not to the extent that we wanted to. So even with the best design plan, I think our concern is that we will still struggle to obtain the resources that we need, even with the funding in hand, to be able to execute this in a proper fashion. I think that's really where we struggle with, setting aside the issue of do we want to make that policy decision to even go down that path. So those are some of the issues. I think I've summarized it to the DPW director. If you want to add anything, certainly you can, but.
No, I think you've hit the nail on the head. You've expressed it very well. It's more, when I first was asked to look at the problem, it was a question of what is the cost, and it quickly became, as Mr. Schultz said, a question of logistics and how, if we have, we're heading into the winter season as we speak, whether we want to admit that or not, and for me to undertake, that much of an additional area and responsibility on this winter would be, anxiety producing, to say the least. So we talked more about the logistics. I think that's where the conversation went. It was a very cooperative discussion between the folks here at the table as well as the business community, but it's just, as Mr. Schultz said, it's a conundrum.
Mr. Evans. And then Mrs. Robertson, I'll let.
It's always fun to talk about snow and ice on a hot day. Eric Evans, 3 Sandra Lane. I'm with the North Reading Chamber of Commerce, and some of my fellow committee members are with me. We've been working diligently, and I wanted to thank Chief Murphy and DPW Director Bauer meet with us and even town administrator to try to figure out a solution to this issue. So, why are we here? Why are we concerned about snow and ice? Back in 2002, this bylaw was put on the books, and at the time it made a lot of sense. If you're 7-Eleven and you have a sidewalk in front of your business, yeah, it made sense. You can shovel it, you can get a broom out and sweep off the snow. That's perfectly sensible. All you need is a shovel and a broom. What wasn't intended was clearing heavily dense packed snow put on the unconnected parcels on sidewalks on Route 28. This bylaw was not really enforced. It wasn't enforced until 2011, so it had a 9-year vacation from even being put into compliance. And over the last few years, it's been more and more compliance, and some structure changes were added to the bylaw. Our committee was here last year talking about the issue and made a concerted effort to work as hard as we could to make this snow removal season work last year. We had a late winter, so I think it made it a little bit easier to get 100% compliance or 90%. But as we all know, there's a lot of flaws in this bylaw. The first flaw is it assumes there's a continuous sidewalk up and down 28. Of course there isn't. Southbound on 28 does not really start until you get to the North Street intersection, maybe slightly before that, and then the rest of the way it fits and starts. I mean, there's nothing in front of the postal facility, so really you don't have a continuous sidewalk going southbound. And northbound, you have that probably the biggest portion of the sidewalk. The town already does some of that. There's some residences in there that don't get done, so you still don't have a way to get from point A to point B on that sidewalk northbound. It unfairly burdens one portion of the business owner community. The DPW already does a massive amount of sidewalks down 62, probably, my estimation, probably more than they need to. There's probably some need to reallocate some of the resources. So if you're Bank of America, your sidewalk gets plowed. If you're Walmart, it doesn't. So that's a big disparity between business owners. It makes no provision for the back-to-back storms. 24-hour rule for compliance is, in a lot of cases, very unreasonable. Fatal flaw right there. And it actually has a negative impact on public safety, because what you're asking to do is plow certain sections to give a false sense that there's actually a way to go from point A to point B when there really isn't. So now you're having people come out onto the street to get by. As the committee has continued to work on these issues surrounding the bylaw, it's become completely clear that the heavily specialized snow removal is really a municipal DPW issue. It's not something that you can ask 50 separate entities to coordinate and actually pull off on a consistent basis, especially when the real need, when the storms start to develop and you have a really bad winter. So in order to, if we were to get together all the business owners and all the property owners that are out there, you'd have to almost form like a business association to come up with the funding, to hire contractors. These are things that you guys are so good at. This is what government is great at. Collecting the funds and then dispersing them and allocating the labor. So when you're getting to this heavy removal and the stuff that the state is putting on the sidewalks, it's a municipal issue. It's not asking a group of property owners and business owners to do this portion of the work. So our recommendation and on the article or the citizens petition that we're putting out there is to vote in favor to repeal the current bylaw as it stands. Allow 2018 and 2019 as a transition year to allow for coordination, figure out resources, equipment, so that we can work, the business community can work with the DPW and the town to figure out each parcel, how it should be cleared, how things should go. And by 2019, 2020, things will be moved in the right direction, and the DPW can take over the task of doing that. The business and the chamber are prepared to work with the contractors, educate the people actually clearing the parking lots to keep the piles down low so there's good visibility and more public safety there. And if there are manpower issues and equipment issues, it gives us a whole year to figure those things out. So we have 12 months, we get through the season, but by next year we'll be fully transferred over where the town is doing the bulk of that work. One other point I wanted to make is it just seems like back to the sidewalk clearing at 62, it seems like there's an extreme amount of mileage that it's getting cleared where some of those resources can be allocated to Route 28. And Route 28 is within 2 miles of the little school, so if you really have to clear snow to get to school, going up from Firestone to the little school is about a 2-mile stretch, so it should be done anyway. So that's what I have to say on that. Jerry, do you have anything to add?
Oh, I actually forget why I'm here. I think Eric's, the only other thing I want to add is that
If you could just
Up to
come
the
to the
mic,
podium and
Jerry.
state your name so the folks at home know who you are.
Jerry Venezia, 9 Pine Glen Drive. There's a public safety issue in 2 respects here. I think one of them is in having people use sidewalks, particularly on the southbound side, that are sidewalks to nowhere. So you're going to be coming down a sidewalk, then you're going to have to leave the sidewalk and actually walk out onto Route 28 in order to continue southbound on 28. The second is that you're going to ask these people to go out there with a snow blower or a shovel to clear the sidewalks in front of their property during a snowstorm or immediately after a snowstorm. And I think there's a public safety issue regarding their safety when they're doing that. We have equipment that we just bought. We just spent, I think, in excess of $100,000 to buy a sidewalk plow. The people that are operating that plow know how to operate that plow. They're using special equipment to do it. They have lights and vests and everything else on so that they can be safe out there on the sidewalks. And these people are being asked to go out there and use a shovel to clear the sidewalks. So I think it's a municipal responsibility to do this. I'm not sure how arbitrarily we impose this liability upon the business community to go out there and shovel the sidewalks in front of their business. The business district that we have is not Andover, it's not Reading. You're not walking from business to business. Here, you're going to get in a car, you're going to go to one place of business. If you want to go to the place next door, you're going to get back in your car, you're going to drive out onto 28, and you're going to pull into the next parking lot. So that doesn't make a lot of sense. I don't really see the necessity for even having to clear those sidewalks. I just don't think there's that much traffic out there, and I think most of the traffic out there is not even related to the business community. So I just, again, that's just to add to what was already said.
It's Robinson.
I do agree that the bylaw is flawed. No question about that. However, because I helped write the bylaw, so I can say that in 2002, and I'm just I thought of this when NSTAR was here, the National Grid. I'm like, Groundhog Day again. I do walk 28. That's my neighborhood. I walk to Walmart. I walk to, well, I don't go to Joe Fish anymore, but I walk that neighborhood and I walk in the winter. And it frustrates me to no end. I cannot walk up that way when I want to walk. This is I'm also on the Commission on Disability. I'm the chairperson of the Commission on Disability. The town, the reason we felt for the committee when we did this initially was that we didn't feel the town could take over the financial responsibility of plowing the sidewalks, all the sidewalks in North Reading. It is under Massachusetts state law, it's a public accommodation issue. So the sidewalks are considered public accommodation. And so the town does have a responsibility to plow the sidewalks that need to be plowed. So we need to come up with a plan, and other towns have done it and have addressed it. And this has been going on for 16 years, and we haven't got very far in that. I just started getting the elderly newsletter, so I've met the stage of hanging out at the senior center. If I want to stay in this town, I want to have access to the sidewalks and access to the businesses. And I don't want to drive. I want to walk. I don't want to drive. And to make a town for folks to age in place, it has to be majority of trying to be able to walk year round and not just for 5 months. Because we've had winters that you cannot walk anywhere for 4 or 5 months due to some sidewalks being cleared and some mounds of snow due to plowing in people's municipal driveways that are 10 feet high and you can't get around the mounds of snow even when the parts of the sidewalks are clear. So there's a whole combination of issues that impact pedestrians that live in this town, either people with disabilities, people, seniors, people with children, dog walkers, unable to have access to the town during the winter months. And that's very important, at least to me. And I know from other people who have talked to me, it's important to them as well. I know one older adult that takes a walk every day in the neighborhood around CVS and did fall, I think last winter, the winter before, and severely injured herself. And she wants to stay in her home, and she's 80-something years old. And that was reported to DPW as an issue, so DPW was aware of it. There's a lot of different ways of addressing this issue, but nobody wants to take the time and put the time and the money and the effort into it. It is a logistical issue. It is a machine issue. It is a personnel issue. Yes, it is. But I disagree about putting everything on for 2 years. I just don't think that's right, because I'm going to be stuck in my house if I don't drive. I'm going to be stuck in my house for the next 2 winters. I don't think that's fair. I don't have a solution. I disagree with revoking the bylaw at this point in time until there is a better solution, as saying, we can't fix it, so let's get rid of it. And I don't think that's the way to go. I think that's all I have to say right now.
Mrs. Minipelli.
Thank you very much.
I just wanted to comment that the bylaw requires of the private business owners the same requirement that the public accommodation law requires of us to clear our own sidewalks for our own buildings. And that's similar to what the bylaw imposes. We're responsible to clear our sidewalks for public accommodation reasons. And I think the bylaw is in place for public safety. I don't believe that we're required to clear private parcel. And I know there's actually a statute in place that allows the town to implement the bylaw, which it did, to make sure these sidewalks are clear. It is, there are certain things that maybe could be cleaned up in the language, especially with respect to the point made about the ongoing snowstorm. And it should read something to the effect of 24 hours, within 24 hours after the snow stops, especially if there's back-to-back storms, which we see around here. But I also wish, and I've talked with Mr. Evans about this ad nauseum at this point, just like everybody else has really put a lot of effort into trying to resolve and bring this to a resolution that's feasible for everyone. I would like to see something to the effect of, you know, maybe the business is making a seasonal contribution that's not a large one. It doesn't have to be $1,000 contribution, or something of a seasonal nature that we can hold aside to manage. You know, it could be, you know, $250 a season if they want. I don't know what it costs the businesses to get the snow removed. So I'd like to hear some information on that, but something that we could hold in some sort of an enterprise fund, for a lack of a better term, that we can use to clear off the snow, you know, something like that that works it out just for this area because of all the concerns. And I wish something like that, you know, could be considered by not just the business owners, but by us here.
Mr. Messeri.
I have a question for you. On a day like today, can you walk everywhere on Route 28 that you need to without stepping on Route 28?
Up to Walmart, yes.
Up to Walmart?
Yeah.
So maybe we're dealing with a section that needs to be done. You know, every time we talk about this, we're talking about the whole length, and we're talking about...
We approached just doing the northbound side, because that's where basically the contiguous sidewalk with driveways are. But it was just, which I'm for the town doing that, but I understand Mr. Ballard is a manpower issue, so.
Well, that's the point I want to make. All right, we've heard from the DPW director, we've heard from the town administrator. The town, if you look at the state of the work that has to get done, they already don't have enough resources just to take care of our existing roads under a snow and ice situation. And then when you layer on this additional one onto it, he's telling you, he doesn't have the resources. So it doesn't even matter whether we want him to do it or not, they can't. They can't even get the contractors to sign up to take care of the snow and ice responsibilities. So I think we just need to move on from the fact that the town's gonna do this. You just don't have the resources. That's just off the table. So we need to come to some resolution on, we stick to the bylaw, because I've heard how we had 90% compliance. I also learned today that anybody that received a ticket paid. So we essentially have 100% compliance from that standpoint. I don't think we actually have a problem now that I was hoping we could come up with a resolution to make this a little easier. And if we're talking about maybe changing something from 24 hours to 48 hours, easy to do it, but.
The two issues is, one is, I wasn't involved in these meetings, so I didn't know about it until I got an email this afternoon that this was happening. And I don't know if there were any other non-business citizens of North Reading and town employees. Was there anybody else, pedestrian advocates, Commission on Disability people involved in these meetings? That would have been nice if we were pulled in.
I don't think the issue was more who was gonna do it. I don't think it ever really was seriously considered that no one would do it. It was a question of who was gonna do it. So I don't see where those folks would really have had a stake in that. We want the sidewalks to be done. It's just a matter of who's gonna do it, who's gonna pay for it.
Okay.
Mr. Evans, you gotta come to the podium if you don't mind.
And, sorry.
So just three quick things, just a correction. We're not looking to not do it this year. We're not looking for a season where there's cooperation and not being done. So I just want to put that for the record. That's not the point. The other point is the town does a tremendous amount of sidewalks. And I still haven't gotten an answer where the priority is and why things can't be prioritized. 28 is so important, why that doesn't get priority over the down deep end of 62 where that's not necessary at, right 24 hours or 48 hours after a storm. So, a simple reallocation of resources. I don't know how much people have looked at that, but it seems like the logical solution to put the priority right on 28.
Mr. Gilberto.
So that's all I have to say.
I think it's an excellent point, Mr. Evans. I would ask the DPW director just to speak to the prioritization.
Generally speaking, sidewalks get a priority based on their proximity to schools. So it has to do with, school pedestrian traffic as well as access to bus stops and things like that. And I think that's everywhere. I don't think that's unique to North Reading. So I would really hesitate to take resources away from a sidewalk, particularly if the community's used to that sidewalk being plowed for the last 10 years. Suddenly we don't do that, and we're reallocating resources for that. So I think if we're going to do 28, I think it needs to be in addition to what we do right now. But we'll certainly take a look at that. We've utilized our new GIS professional to do some mapping and to take a closer look at what we do already, and we'll continue to look at it, but I would hesitate to take those resources away right now.
Yes.
I know Mr. Evans said there's about 50 parcels, I think you mentioned. Do you know the footage, the square footage of that, or
We do. It's
mileage,
about
whatever?
14,000 feet, I think.
It's about 2.6 miles.
It was 2.6, right, Chief?
Yeah.
It's actually less than a mile sidewalk.
So did Walmart, are they part of your petition? So who is part of this petition
To
to,
mom and pops.
how many is that?
It's the little guys.
How many is that?
Probably
50?
50.
Plus the employees that work at these establishments.
And then you get some strip malls that may have like 4 stores in there,
So what you're talking, it's 50 parcels that are requesting.
50 businesses, I'd say. Because you might have more than one business on a parcel.
It's parcels. How many parcels? Because it doesn't sound like we have that many people that really want this revoked.
40-some parcels.
Well, I think you had 50 people sign a petition, Mr. Chairman, which is a lot.
Yeah, that's fine. You have that right. You have the right, but,
There was 50 people.
yeah, I'm asking how many parcels, how many parcels?
Mr. Evans, you said around 40?
There's around, I counted the other day, 43 parcels on the list. There's a couple parcels owned by the same owner, but other places.
Okay. So, I guess we'll,
Chuck has
oh,
something to say.
sorry, if you, oh, sure, I didn't see you there, sorry. I didn't see you had your hand up.
You want me to stand up?
I didn't see you had your hand up, I apologize.
Charles Carucci, 3 Chester Street. I happen to front Route 28 with my home. I also own a business on Route 28. And all you people own small businesses that are on the board. Am I correct? So anything that's done becomes a burden, especially if the town is adding it to you. I'll give you a little story. There is no sidewalk on my side. I'm on the southbound side. Back a few years ago, a gentleman was walking on my property because there is no sidewalk. The choice is walk on 28 or walk on my property. The same with my neighbor. Just so happens he was walking his dog, fell down, broke his leg. The next morning, I get a knock on the door. Can I have the name of your insurance company? Okay? So, my point being, if you touch something, you own it. We're out there, you want us to do the sidewalks, it's a state piece of property. Something happens to somebody, we own it. That's my point I'm trying to get across. And it also adds to your insurance policy. But the other thing, I was sitting here tonight, and I was trying to think, what is so special? And you people gave it to me when you were talking about National Grid. You're looking for skilled employees to do work. We have the skilled employees working for the town. There's got to be a way to make this work. They have the equipment, they know how to do it. You all agree, skilled help is a big thing. I really want you to think about that.
Oh,
You've got to work with us.
We don't have
We
enough
want to
of it.
work with you.
We don't have enough
We
skill.
believe in safety. That's the point. So I would say the superintendent should probably look a little closer for us and for the town. You have the equipment, you have the help.
No,
The
we
last
don't.
thing I will tell,
Mr.
wait a
Kuchar,
minute, the
we don't
last
have
thing
the
I
help.
will tell you, money talks. You're looking for help? In the wintertime, I happen to talk to a lot of the guys who plow because I have a gas station. Money makes a big difference. It costs money to move a truck on the road. You gotta think about that. I know you're trying to cut corners, but you can't do it all the time. The last
We're
thing,
cutting
I
corners.
suppose, the worst thing that I see is I see that little sidewalk machine coming up 28, plowing across the street from Walmart, jump back out on 28, go all the way up the street a little bit further, just after Greenbrier, jump on the sidewalk, plow that, get up to the end of it, jump off of it, get back on 28, pedal my way up to the cemetery, plow the cemetery, turn around and come back. I mean, that's ludicrous. That thing is out there. That's it, gentlemen. Thank you. Remember, the skilled employee.
Mr. Gilberto.
So just a few things, so I just was able to open up the,
Oh,
We're plowing the other side anyway? Is that, are we plowing the other side?
plowing
of our-
certain
So-
sections.
hold on. So we, in addition to the areas that the DPW director identified, we also plow the sidewalks in front of town-owned land. There's a parcel of land that's owned by the town across from Walmart. It's commonly referred to as conservation of wetland, but it's undeveloped land that the town owns. And there's also an area that's just to the north of Greenbrier that's also undeveloped land that, from what my understanding, is an access point for a bus stop on the corner there that we also do. Those are the two spots that we identify. I'm not aware that we're doing the cemetery. We may have been at one point, but now we've been contacting the manager of the religious congregation, and they have been doing it. We also do the Hillview. We do in front of that area. It's municipally owned property. We do right over to Central Street. So those are the areas that we currently do right now. With regard to the footage and the parcels, I'm looking at the former DPW director's calculation that we reviewed last year. I'm not going to get into the cost because I know that was a disputed item, but in terms of the parcels, there were 100 parcels that were identified, and they totaled 19,700 feet worth of sidewalk. So that's the extent that we're talking about here, based on the calculation that was done at that point in time. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Yeah, sure. We're going to have a public hearing on this at some point, but.
Yeah, real brief.
Just shit short.
Just in fairness to both sides of this argument, the problem's not the 3-inch storm. I mean, DPW would say we can do a 3-inch storm. That's not a problem. It's the heavy, long durational storms where the problem lies, where you might have snow removal. And again, I just want to say both sides are really trying to work together. I appreciate everyone's effort. I mean, I've spent more time on this than I ever care to admit. But, you know, it's a hard issue. But again, the issue is not the 3-inch, the 6-inch storm. Our machine can go right up and down 28, no problem. You guys freely admit that. It's the heavy storm or the back-to-back storms where it's the problem. The other issue is you guys have no control when the state plows.
Correct.
Unlike 62 where you can time when the sidewalk's going out because you know when your plow's going by.
That's right.
We don't know on 28. But again, I don't think it's fair for the businesses either. So I don't know what the solution is there.
Can I ask you a naive question? So we have wing plows, right?
Wing plows exist, yeah.
I mean, can they do the sidewalk?
So, very inefficiently. So that, we do
I don't
have,
care.
we do have the luxury of having sidewalks that are directly on the back of the curb, but then you run into utility poles, signs, things like that, where the wing plow has to come off. So there are sections that you could hit with a wing plow, but it's not a solution to the problem, because there'll be gaps in between where someone's gonna have to go out there in a smaller machine or by hand and clear those spots. So that's a very, that's surgery with a sledgehammer versus a scalpel.
So I do think that we're onto something though in regards to getting those sidewalks down to Walmart. But I still am a believer that I just don't see the need to do all of them because we do have these gaps. And I know the chief and I talked today about there being crosswalks. So you could get to a certain spot and then go across the street and then go cross the street again. I know that does exist, but not so sure it brings the value. Meg, I know you represent a lot of these people that do want these sidewalks.
Well, I mean, you can have set up a priority system. In other cities and towns, is priority 1, 2, 3, and which would be plowed and which is the need of where people should be plowed. So there is different ways that the town can look at how they will prioritize sidewalks. And also, in addition to this, kind of another issue to throw in is continuing to clear sidewalks as there's remelting and re-icing, which is another issue because that's not done in this town.
No.
It's plowed once and that's it, you're done. But that's another issue
So
that
we're
has
gonna
to
have a
be
public
addressed.
hearing on this. I think we vetted a lot that's out there. Hopefully between now and our public hearing, we can come up with some solution, but in the end, we may not have one, and we just go to town meeting and we let town meeting voters decide. Because I don't disagree. Some of these areas are very expensive for a little small business to take care of it. It's not realistic. I get it, but at the end of the day, we sit here and we have to decide. Is public safety our number one goal? If it is, then we have to decide what that means. And I think that we have a small number of residents that want to access to those sidewalks during the winter. I think we need to probably figure out where that is. I just can't imagine it's the entire length of Route 28. I do think that area from Eastgate all the way down to Walmart is probably a very popular area to walk. But after that, I don't know, that's my own personal opinion. And maybe that's an area we can find a happy medium here. But I will say, since we look at the bills, Mr. Carucci, we look at the expenses, and we also heard from the experts, we don't have enough resources, equipment's expensive, and you know better than anyone on Mr. Carucci, because I've seen you out there in your little skid steer removing snow after 14, 18, 20 hours. The last thing these guys want to do is jump back in a skid steer and go down those sidewalks for 14, 18 hours. We have to be realistic. The manpower is stretched.
Remember, You wouldn't be in business if you weren't making money. You have to make money. You have to pay these people. You cry about not having enough help. You have to pay them. They'll go someplace else. They do.
Again, we don't have it in the
You
spot.
don't see it, guys. You don't see it.
And you don't sit here, Mr. Carucci, and look at the bills, and we have to make decisions with the resources we have, and so it's in the board's hand, it's in the board's hand, and we got it. Ma'am, one more minute, and we're gonna move on to the
That's
subject.
fine, I'll be very, very brief. My name is Susan LaCherco O'Neill of Sioux Poly Properties. We own the parcel of land at 246 Main Street. Some years ago, the state came in, took a bunch of land, paid for it, said, we're gonna put sidewalks on. Okay, I had no say in the matter. Put sidewalks on, I don't own that land anymore, theoretically. We've been plowing, last year we plowed. It cost me just shy $3,000 for that one section of sidewalk. And I think the reason it costs so much to us is because we've got 2 lanes of traffic on 28 dumping all that snow that the state churns up back onto the sidewalk, which, I mean, we were at it constantly. And so I know that we're trying to find a happy medium. I know you're probably thinking, oh, well, $3,000, no big deal.
That's a lot of money.
But it's a huge amount of money to us.
A lot of money. Yeah,
Thank you,
I get
sir.
it. No, I understand. Okay, so, Chiefs, if you don't have anything else on this, we're good, we can move on? And I'll just turn over to Mr. O'Leary to make a recommendation or hold off for town meeting, and we'll continue this debate.
Well, on Article, it'll be 20, right?
Yeah.
Which is the towns. So it'll be Article 20.
Recommended
Are we going to be doing a recommendation at town meeting, or are we going to be moving to Passover?
I say
In other words, are we
recommended town
going to
meeting.
be proposing a timeline change or anything like that?
Why don't we leave both options open? Yeah.
Okay, then. Mr. Chairman, I move to make a recommendation at town meeting on Article 20, amend code, general bylaws, chapter 158-9, snow removal on streets and sidewalks.
Motion is second. Any more discussion? None heard. All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Unanimous.
I had a question.
You can do it on the next article. Article 21.
Article 21, Mr. Chairman. I think, you want to open up discussion on this now? No, let's see. Article 21.
Recommended town meeting.
Recommended to town meeting. Mr. Chairman, I move to make a recommendation to town meeting on Article 21, Citizens Petition, delete or repeal. General bylaw, chapter 158-9, snow removal and streets and sidewalks.
Second by Ms. Minu. Thank you, gentlemen, for staying. Second by Ms. Minipelli. Any more discussion? Mr. Schultz.
Just real quick, Mr. Venezia, you're going to be amending that if it goes to town meeting floor,
I
right?
think it specifically identifies snow and ice on sidewalks, but it would be amended just to include that.
Just that one
part of
section.
that
Okay, just want to clarify that.
Although I think that was drafted based on the article that was in the town meeting warrant from June, so, but it will be amended.
Okay.
So is the amendment that's going to be proposed will fit within the 4 corners of the article, you believe? Just
Without a doubt.
without a doubt. All right. Weren't you on the board when we suggested this initially? Oh, no, probably not.
I would have never made that kind
I wasn't on the board when this was. Okay, so. We have a motion, we have a second. Any more discussion? None heard. All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Unanimous. 22.
Article 22 is a citizen's petition to change the name of Bonpel Drive to Bryan's Way. This is a citizen's petition. As we've been advised by town council, it does not require approval by town meeting, so action by town meeting would be non-binding upon the board. The selectmen have the authority to change the name of the way at this point without town meeting action. Mr. Chairman, you and I think, intend to meet with the petitioner to talk about the issue of the cost implication, so we'll try to get that scheduled before October 1st. In light of all that, my recommendation would be to recommend this article at town meeting.
Mr. Chairman, I move to make a recommendation at town meeting, Article 22, Citizens Petition, change Bonpel Drive to Bryan's Way.
Second?
A motion and a second. Any discussion? Mike, you want to try to do that this week or next week?
This or early next week, yes, sir.
Early next week works better for me.
I'm sorry?
Early next week works better for me.
For you? Okay, great.
All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Unanimous. And that's it.
Correct.
All right. Legal bills for July.
Mr. Chairman, I move to approve legal bills for July 2018 in the amount of $2,834.91 as follows. Copeland and Page PC General, $1,789.91. Copeland and Page PC Labor, $1,045, total $2,834.91.
Second.
A motion and a second. Any discussion? None heard. All those in favor?
Aye.
Yes, Mr. Schultz, second. Aye. Opposed? Unanimous.
Let's see, how come I haven't done?
Minutes.
We have another legal bill, I
Sorry.
believe. Mr. Chairman, I move to approve payment of invoice number 11370 dated August 15, 2018, in the amount of $54,246.04. This is for Furman, Gregory, and Deptula.
Second.
I have a motion, a second by Mr. Schultz. Any discussion? None heard. All those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Unanimous. Now the minutes.
The minutes. Mr. Chairman, I move to approve the September 6th, 2018 regular session minutes as written.
Second.
A motion, second, Mrs. Minipelli.
I just want to ask the board to table those. There was lengthy colloquy, particularly about National Grid, and I don't think that a lot of the discussion is reflected in the minutes. I know it doesn't have to have lots and lots of detail, but I think that some of the things may have been misquoted, probably because we went on and on for a length of time. So I'm asking the board to table this so that I can work with the TA to make some amendments to it, more reflective of the discussion that occurred.
Okay. Second. I wasn't here, so I can't help.
Okay.
I'm going to be.
So if Mr. Messeri will withdraw his second, I will withdraw the motion.
Thank you.
Okay. Next, approve and sign the integrated agreement.
Wait a second, I have some more.
Oh, sorry.
We have some executive session
That
minutes.
was full.
Mr. Chairman, I move to approve the September 6th, 2018 executive session minutes as written.
I have a motion and a second by Mrs. Minipelli.
Just a second, okay.
It's getting late.
I don't know, I wasn't gonna do it.
Any discussion on that? None heard. All those in favor?
Aye.
Oh, so not I. I am going to recuse myself. I wasn't on here. Abstaining. I'm abstaining. Not recusing. Abstaining. Okay. Now, we're on
401.
item 16, right? Approve and sign the integrated agreement. Mr. Gilberto.
Through you, Mr. Chairman, as it reads, this is an integrated agreement. It's to integrate the memorandum of agreement that was signed with the police union back in 2016. There is no change under the terms. One clarification relative to the education incentive, and other than that, it reflects the MOA that was agreed in 2016, and I'd ask the board to vote favorably.
And you want today's date, which is 18th?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay.
Through you, Mr. Chairman.
So, Mr. Chairman, I move to approve and sign the integrated agreement between the Town of North Reading and the North Reading Police Union, Massachusetts Coalition of Police, Local 456, for the period of June 1st, 2016 to June 30th, 2019.
Second.
A motion and a second. Any more discussion? None heard?
No, just
Oh,
other
sorry.
than, this is nice that we have an integrated agreement now. I mean,
It is.
This is, again, one of
It's a
the
good
goals
cost.
that we had to get all of our contracts up to date and integrated so that when we move forward, we're working off of one document.
Thank the union for working hard to get all that done. There's a lot of moving parts to pull that together, so appreciate both parties working diligently to wrap that up. Anything else? None. nothing else, we're good to go. All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Unanimous.
And everybody, this will be passed down. 2 copies. And 182018.
And I guess we can do the town administrator's report while we're signing?
Certainly, through you, Mr. Chairman. Couple of announcements. First, due to repairs that will prohibit the use of the plumbing system in Flint Memorial Library, the library and the activity room will be closed for the day tomorrow, Tuesday, September 18th. The library anticipates reopening on Wednesday, September 19th at 10 o'clock a.m. Approximately 40 people attended the Senior Tax Work-Off Program meeting held on September 12th. An update to the changes in the program was provided, and a copy of the online advisory was also attached to the report. As a reminder, the Planning Commission, working with the Metropolitan Area Planning Commission as its consultant, is creating a new master plan for the town. Information regarding this project may be found on the CPC's webpage. Residents are encouraged to participate in the online survey and upcoming public forums scheduled for September 26th at 6:30 p.m. in the activity room at Flint Memorial Library and October 30th in the Distance Learning Lab at North Reading High School. The DPW has been advised by the town's construction contractor that the Park and Haverhill Street paving projects scheduled for last week have been delayed until approximately the first week of October. DPW has evaluated its plow contractor rate of pay schedule. I wish Mr. Carucci was here for this. DPW has evaluated its plow contractor rate of pay schedule and intends to implement an early approval incentive of $5 per hour for contractors on board by October 31st. The goal is to restore between 5 and 10 contracted pieces of equipment lost to attrition and other market factors over the past few years, and the department intends to implement this change effective immediately. North Reading's polling location was evaluated for accessibility during the September 4th state preliminary election. I'm pleased to report that the final status of the polling place was all elements compliant, quote unquote. Congratulations to Town Clerk Barbara Stats and her staff, all of our registrars, wardens, and poll workers, the police department and DPW, and St. Teresa's Church for their assistance. And that concludes my report for this evening. Thank you.
Old and new business, Mr. O'Leary.
All set, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
Mr. Messeri.
2 items. One, I think, may have already been reported. Out here at Town Hall, down at the far end, there's a yellow post that's knocked over and laying there. If you're facing Town Hall, the
Sure.
far right corner where the stairway is.
Okay.
Okay.
Inside the building, right?
This side, yeah. Not this side,
Okay,
the far side, I'm sorry. There's
On
a
the-
stairway
Yes,
near the gym,
yes.
all right? And right at that stairway, one of those yellow poles has been knocked over.
Oh, I didn't know. Been they- Oh, I had not noticed it, but I'm told that DPW is aware and may have addressed it.
I had suggested at least they remove the
Yeah,
pole
sure.
laying on the ground.
We'll-
Yeah, they're doing something about it. They know about it.
We'll follow up with DPW to make sure it gets
And the
addressed.
second item is just something to put on the, I was in the library parking lot the other day, and actually it was Saturday night, and my wife was driving, she parked up against the far fence, and looking at the fence, it's falling apart. I don't know if anyone's aware of that.
I'll ask town buildings to follow up.
I'm not
With it.
insinuating, I'm not implying that she hit anything, because it's,
Oh, that's why I was just.
That's what I was gonna say.
I figured.
Uh-oh.
Just gonna ask, well, Mr. Coonan, what was your
Yeah.
insurance company? What's the name of your insurance company?
Right. No, what I'm talking about is
headline.
the fence itself, all the way
Sure.
along, is leaning over. I think at least one of the posts is broken.
We'll determine the ownership of the fence and
Yeah, I
follow
think
up.
Maureen has a picture of your wife.
And I believe it's the fence we put up because of the way it's made.
Oh. We'll follow
That's
up with
all I
town
have.
buildings.
Thank you, Mr.
Siri, Mr. Schultz.
Nothing further.
Just a quick, for your thought, possibly. This just reminded me of it. When you come in this entryway, you know, you can come in and then you can do the half moon and pull out.
Yes.
Can we put a drop box for residents on that side where the island of grass is so that they don't have to get out of their car and they can just drop off what they're trying, their payments and things like that?
I love that idea.
So,
It's gonna be
it would
Right
be
after the handicap spot.
much better than the entry the wrong way, which some folks do to drop it off. So I believe that this has been looked at in the past. I don't want to speak to why it hasn't been implemented, but I'll follow up with DPW relative to the possibility for that.
And I just have one more thing, because I did actually hit a fence that.
I think that's an admission.
But, yeah, but it did just damage my car. I didn't damage the fence. At McGuire Park, there is a reason why the spots are lined so that you don't park, and a big no parking zone sign is there. And that's because you can't get into the parking for the tot lot. You know the area of the tot lot? There's
Kid
a
spot.
whole very thin strip of parking. So if you park where it says no parking, people can't clear around your vehicles during the soccer games and things like that. They're gonna hit the fencing. So don't park where it says no parking. That's all. That's just a little mini public service.
Might like
That's not to say I wouldn't have hit it anyway, however, you
Mr.
know.
Siri, please.
I came down Concord Street yesterday, and the sign is still up there for paving on Park.
Yes.
It was being delayed until,
Correct. So the paving, we've been informed by the contractor that the paving has been delayed till approximately the first week of October.
all right.
And so the signs that I saw indicated that the paving was delayed. I'm not sure if maybe they missed updating one. Did you see it recently? Not
I just saw
I
our
thought it said
paving.
delayed.
delayed. That's what it should say.
Did say delay?
Yeah, but they just did that recently.
Yeah,
When
it would have been
yeah.
last week they did it, end of last
They
week.
did change that for,
But
Yep.
we are delayed, unfortunately, although we are still looking to get it done this construction season. And these are two big projects, by the way, the North Street to the
and
Andover
I said
Town Line.
yesterday it was Friday night.
Okay.
And Parks and Rec is waiting for the same issue to be done, the parking lot right around the youth center at
Yes.
IRP. They're waiting for this contract to be done with Park Street first.
That's correct.
Yeah.
Anything else? Okay, I just have one. After the October town meeting, we typically meet for strategic planning, correct?
Yes,
So we probably should get that on our schedule?
definitely.
All right.
Our next meeting is
October 1st.
the 1st. And then, why do I have the 4th down?
I
We got
have
something else going on.
Patriots game, I guess?
A Thursday, the 4th,
It's a
yeah.
Thursday night.
I think we have a Thursday.
We met
Isn't it a Thursday night game?
I think it's, yeah, it might be the 4th.
Town meeting's the 15th.
Did we have the 4th down for a reason?
I don't have it noted for a
Is there
reason.
some
I don't have
special-
the 4th down.
Okay.
But
So we got the 1st and the 15th.
in the 15th.
Correct.
Right. Well, the 15th is October town meeting.
Right.
I have a board meeting on my calendar for 6 o'clock. I don't know.
When?
We must have talked about it.
On the
When?
4th?
On the 15th.
Yeah, the 15th,
Yeah.
well, that's town meeting, that's
Yeah.
town meeting anyway, yeah.
Oh, yeah, that's town meeting. I have that too.
No, I had it on, I had the 4th down for some, Thursday the 4th, I
I'm
think
going
it was.
to be
some-
late for
yeah.
town meeting. So you could start the meeting at 6. I most likely won't be there at 6. I'll be trying to be pushing to make 6:30. But I'll do my best. But I don't know if we're going to have a lot of actions by then, right? Since we're meeting on the
It's,
1st.
we may have a few, Swan Pond Road comes to mind
Yeah.
as a potential issue.
I'll do my best to get there on time, but I just wanted to warn you.
Sure.
Mrs. Minipelli will have to take the helm until I arrive. So after that, do we want to try to do it in October, or would you rather wait till November? Maybe that first week in November?
What's this
I
for?
won't- What day is it?
Last week of the month is usually bad for me work-wise.
Right,
First
that's
week
why
of
I
November.
figure we'd wait till November.
We do that in the morning, right, if I remember right?
Negative, we do it in the evening. We usually have food brought in.
That's right, those cookies you bring.
And I'll bring some dessert. And we do it over at the Hillview. But we did, actually, the
We
police
did it
station
at the
last time.
Police
last time.
station.
And I thought that worked out pretty good.
Yeah, it did, yeah.
So, I'm not sure that week of it's election day on the 6th, so maybe the Thursday night, the 8th? Thursday evening?
Yeah.
We'll get a one-day liquor license for that. We'll put that on the agenda for next meeting. But can we make that work? And we'll start at 6, is that okay? Kate, can you do 6 on that Thursday night? Or Thursday night's tough for you to do 6, since we're serving
Six
dinner.
is fine.
Okay?
It's fine for me. I don't know about everybody else.
Okay,
6 o'clock on the 8th.
great.
At the police station.
Yep. Okay. And between now and then, we'll work out the logistics. I just wanted everyone to get it on their calendar. Thank you. That's all I have. I'll take a motion to adjourn.
Move to adjourn.
Mr.
Second.
O'Le- Seconded by Mr. Schultz. Mr. O'Leary.
Aye.
Mr. Misery.
Goodbye.
Aye, aye.
Aye, aye.
Thank you.